All right. Well, good morning. It's my pleasure to call to order the 10 a.m. Special Public Safety and Vital Services Measure Committee meeting of April 13th, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz.
Here.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Present.
Committee Member Madland. Here. Committee Member Dewey.
Here.
Committee Member Perez Andreessen. Committee Member Coman.
Here.
Committee Member Abernathy.
Here.
Committee Member Rojas Mora.
Here.
And Committee Member Prince.
Here.
All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public comments.
All right. Statements for items listed on today's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda item. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, you can give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the committee. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a public speaker card. It's located in the back of the chambers, and hand it to the city clerk. Madam Clerk, please call the first public speaker, or do we have any public speaker cards?
Chair Ortiz, we've received one public speaker card for agenda item public statements from Edward S. Robinson.
All right. Mr. Robinson, please approach.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a little short. Sorry about that. My name is Edward Robinson. I'm a community social worker, and thanks for having me. Wanted to address specifically 5A, specifically the memo from City Manager Clegg, where he talks about the measure priorities. I know that we're re-examining the fiscal year budget for this measure, and I think it's important that you, as the committee, apply a little more specificity to those measure priorities. Additionally, I think that it seems like some of those measures are duplicative in nature. For example, let's talk about measure number 1, which is to increase police staffing to improve police response times, reduce crimes, increase neighborhood police patrols. Then we go to 2, improve rapid response to assaults and robberies. And then 3, and then 4, and then 5, all speak to the increased presence of law enforcement. What I'm saying, I think that the substantive point that we're trying to get at is increased funding, increased funding for law enforcement. I think that the staff is able to provide the oversight, and I know that when I was a soldier, when I served in Iraq, what was of most importance was the equipment, having the top-notch equipment, the best gloves, the best tools, the best cams that we needed while we were out in sector, when I was in Iraq as an infantryman. I can only imagine what these guys are going through. So I think that what we're really getting at is a need for increased funding, and then we talk about how that's going to be allocated within the confines of the department. I think that's their job, that they're the subject matter experts there. So that's what I think we're getting at. Then we talk about addressing fiscal responsibility. That's number 10. When I served as your 3rd General Trustee to KSARA in 2020, one thing that we did on that board was an asset allocation. And that was almost like the distribution of labor, how we were going to address each priority of the KSARA board in accordance with the charters and et cetera. So what I'm suggesting is that you guys engage in something similar. I don't know that that's happened. I haven't seen anything of that sort in the minutes, but my suggestion is that these priorities should be re-examined prior to talking about the budget and how it's going to be spent. If the priorities are re-examined and you allocate that
Mr.
labor
Robinson, your
correctly,
time has expired. If you could
then
please
what will
bring your
happen
comments
is
to a
you'll
close.
be able to use those funds correctly. Thank you for your time.
All right. Do we have any other public speaker cards, Madam Clerk?
Chair Ortiz, we do not have any other speaker cards.
All right. Next item, please.
Adoption of minutes. Item 3A, adoption of minutes from the March 7th, 2023 Oversight Committee meeting.
right, so the minutes were included in the packet that was sent to us and notice to the public. So do I have a motion for approval of the minutes as presented by the city clerk?
So moved.
Motion from Vice Chair Campbell. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Motion from Vice Chair Campbell, second by Committee Member Dewey. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz?
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell? Aye. Committee Member Madland? Committee Member Dewey? Aye. Committee Member Perez Andreessen is absent. Committee Member Coman?
Yes.
Committee Member Abernathy? Aye. Committee Member Rojas Mora?
Yes.
And Committee Member Prince?
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item 5A, new business, fiscal year 2023-24 Public Safety and Vital Services, PSVS measure, proposed budget.
All right. And we will turn to City Manager Clegg.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. This kicks off our regular budget cycle process today. So we have an overview that I'll cover fairly quickly, and then we have presentations related to police and public safety and public works and some of our capital improvement projects there. But to run through the quick overview here, again, reminder of our council goals. We always preface that alignment with the council's priorities, and then also with the priorities established by resolution related to the Public Safety Vital Services tax measure. As was noted in public comment, 6 of those first 7 on the left hand side there are related to policing, law enforcement. We also have the item for keeping public areas safe and clean. We also have a reference to our fire department as an essential service, an item on homelessness and the importance of addressing homelessness through partnerships as well as through affordable housing. Next is the fiscal stability of the city, and then economic development through creating jobs, development, and business retention and attraction and workforce development. And then those last 2 about enhancing amenities throughout the city for quality of life, as well as our neighborhoods, taking better care of our neighborhoods and our parks. Also, we had a little bit of constricted time at our mid-year process, but do have some new committee members, and just wanted to provide some quick overview of a couple of key points that we've reviewed with past committees just related to the resolutions establishing the scope and the purpose and objectives of the committee. A quick one, actually, too. I wanted to just pull this back forward. The ballot measure itself references this language, and it was a good reminder to me at our last meeting. This was referenced by a committee member, and thought that it would be valuable to reference for the committee and for the public. Now, while this ballot measure is what was on the ballot, there are 2 resolutions that establish a little more detail, but this is, a foundational piece that references clearly multiple aspects there of public safety, as well as to crime prevention, homelessness, retention and attraction of businesses and jobs. There is a reference there to unrestricted general revenue purposes, and also the importance of the accountability and transparency related to the tax. As I mentioned, that there are 2 different resolutions, one that established the ballot measure, one that established the oversight committee, and that a resolution that established the ballot measure is about 15 pages, but wanted to provide a few highlights from that. There were references as to the purpose of the measure. The sales tax revenues had been declining due to changes in consumer habits and changes in how some of those sales tax collections were made at the state level. That the city needs dependable local sources of revenue to fund essential, necessary, and appropriate city services. The city had taken multiple actions over multiple years to keep expenditures in line with declining revenues, while also attempting to maintain that level of basic services that the residents expect. That additional expenditure reductions or revenue enhancement would be necessary to continue our ongoing expenses with available revenues. A local funding measure would provide protected local, and that's an important piece, is a protected local source under the authority of the city to prevent additional cuts to essential, necessary, and appropriate general city services. And then there's a reference to the inability to add service provider or other staff in those years to keep up with the community demand for services. There's also some references in that same resolution to specifics like the state of California changes and changes in state law and unfunded mandates that were negatively impacting the city's budget, unfortunately. Growth of the city by population and by land mass and size. That we had fewer officers than comparable cities. There's references to our crime statistics, our fire calls for service statistics, and a reference to the rise in homelessness highlighted as elements of the need for additional resources. Also, though, it's important to point out that the key language in that resolution about the community indicated that accountability and oversight was very important, that the council would adopt a resolution establishing the composition of this committee that we're meeting in today to act in an advisory capacity to review the expenditure of revenues and ensuring that the proceeds are expended in a manner consistent with the priorities of the ballot measure, and the 13 priorities were listed there in that resolution. Also, that the city would ensure transparency through an accounting of those distinctly from other revenues. That's why we have different accounts and basically a separate fund accounting structure for these proceeds to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on them, and that we would publish an annual report to inform the residents how the funds are being expended, and that we would have an annual independent audit that covered the expenditures and revenues from this tax measure. To summarize several of the pieces of the resolution, they're really in 4 key buckets around the oversight and transparency requirements. Again, a 9-member Citizens Oversight Committee. This is actually established by that second resolution. When it established the committee, it made it specifically a 9-member. The ballot says no more than 9, but the council chose to go to that number in the resolution. That we would publish that annual report, have annual financial audits, and that distinct accounting. I think it's also worth sharing with this committee that the city council has oversight over the entire city budget. These independent financial audits occur for the entire city budget. So we have independent financial auditors that audit all of the books of the city. We have actually what it's called a rules and procedures that we do extra look at the PSVS revenues and expenditures. We actually look harder at that specific subset of the budget than any other fund that we have as part of our independent financial auditors' actions every year. And then I think it's also worth just pointing out that we have a performance audit program, that we have a consultant firm who comes in, and in addition to those independent financial audits, they're doing performance audits of different functions of the city on a rolling basis. And so there are many policies and procedures and practices within the purview of our professional staff and the city council that are also helping to add to the oversight and transparency of the city budget, and specifically the public safety vital services tax budget that is, while the scope of the oversight committee is a bit more targeted, there are many other pieces that are in play that are helping us to make sure that we produce these reports and audits and performance audits of these revenues as well. Some reminders about the role of the Oversight Committee. We covered this actually last year with the new members, but didn't at mid-year, so we're just covering this again. It's to provide that independent verification the revenues are consistent with those 13 priorities, advise the City Council on goals and objectives associated in association with the funds. That's direct language from the resolution. And I think it's important to note that there's value in that verification and an accountability and a check and a balance. And so while it may seem like it's a bit routine to say, yes, those those expenditures are consistent with the 13 priorities. Imagine if a proposal came forward at some point that was inconsistent, and how important it would be for someone to point to the fact that it doesn't align with those 13 priorities. There's additional language in the resolution that talks about holding public meetings to receive public comment, review presentations from staff, and discuss spending priorities. That's what we're doing here today. That the city staff presentations would be provided in advance of the annual budget process, and the annual budget process for council is typically in May and June, and that's why we meet in April with this group to meet that with that expectation or requirement, and that the committee may make recommendations on funding priorities for the measure. And then a note there again that we look for ratification of the recommendations being consistent with the PSVS spending priorities. So shifting gears now into budget overview. What are we looking at in this coming year? So the good news about some of our ongoing resources is that we've put those towards critical staffing and community needs. In prior years, we're not expecting as many ongoing or operating requests moving forward. But there are some in this year. We are looking at a flattening of our expected revenues in this fund. As you noted on the ballot measure, it said, it was anticipated to be a $50 million tax. We're fortunate at this point that it's a $100 million tax. But we're looking, you'll see a chart, excuse me, on the next slide, that there's a very slight decrease in our anticipated revenues for this coming year. The focus that you'll see in the presentations over the next couple of meetings is around public safety homelessness, improving our streets, which we actually have not funded a lot of streets work out of the Public Safety Vital Services tax historically as we were building up our reserves and addressing some deferred maintenance in parks. Now we're fortunate to be able to put some of those funds towards our streets, although there still are some local park projects proposed. And then some percentage-wise, a small percentage of the budget to look at some contracts for service to help us to be more efficient and effective in our operations as a city. And then lastly, just going into this next budget year with some uncertainty, we need to make sure that there are contingencies as well as reserves that are set aside as we don't know what may happen with the economic downturn. Here's that chart that I mentioned. You'll see there that we were 102 million last year, close to 101 in this coming year, but slightly down. We're going to remain pretty cautious in our revenue projections. This is a very conservative projection. We hope that our actual revenues exceed our projections, but we always play it safe. And interestingly, we have seen minimal evidence of the slowdown, at least in our collections at this point, but with forecasts and economists worrying for the future, we're wanting to be prepared. Another overview of perspective, the proposals that you're going to see over the next couple meetings, they reflect input from the City Council, from this same body last year and this year. We take into account the comments and suggestions from the committee. And then also, though, our public stakeholders, as they make comments and requests, we try to balance that out as best we can as staff to provide proposals to the committee and the council that are reflective of those priorities that we've heard. Again, fewer staffing requests than prior years, focused on our major initiative. And again, it's a lot about public safety, streets, and there's a little bit in there for parks, beautification, and efficiencies. So even though it is close to $101 million revenues in this coming year, the carry forward that wasn't allocated at mid-year and any other obligations like our reserves obligations, there's $20 million in one-time fund balance that is available. And so we're looking at $120 million appropriation for this coming year. But we're actually proposing about $36 million in new proposals to the committee and to the council. Part of what that means is that there are other proposals in prior years. Our ongoing number last year was $53 million. And then we have what we call recurring operating costs. Those are contracts for service or allocations for economic development initiatives that do not have to be renewed every year, but we've been carrying them forward year over year as operating, recurring operating costs. But there are things that, for example, if the priorities of the community and the council shifted, or if we got into tougher financial times, those would be things that we could reduce. For example, we have about $1 million a year that goes into our economic opportunity area funds. There's about $1 million a year that goes into a redevelopment bucket of funds to help purchase blighted properties in our business districts. We also have funding that goes towards implementation of our economic development strategic plan, and even some of our homelessness services where we're providing private security or cleanup patrols. Those are all contract services that we don't consider a permanent ongoing cost. We expect those could change over time or could be reduced. So we call those recurring operating costs. Between the recurring operating costs and our ongoing costs, we're close to I think it was $65 million, $67 million in the budget. But then we also have some other obligations and set-asides that we want to consider. And so we're really only proposing about $36 million worth of new items for the committee to consider as well as the council to consider. You'll see this header throughout some of the presentations into the future. And there's a couple different categories, and they're in your administrative report materials, but just want to highlight that here for discussion. So the column that says PSVS, those are the recommendations that we as staff would suggest move forward as priority items within the budget. 2 years ago, when the budget was uncertain, we created a column or a category called contingency. What that means is we're recommending we don't actually move forward with those projects at the beginning of the fiscal year. We wait until halfway through the fiscal year. When we get to mid-year, we'll take a look back and make sure that our revenue collections are actually on track with our projections. If they are, then we're in good shape as far as the budget's concerned, and we can move forward with those contingent projects. But if we see that revenues decline and we're not collecting at the rate that we expected, those would be projects that we would forego to balance the budget. Maybe we wouldn't spend on those projects because we're not going to receive the same amount of revenues that we expected. So it's a safety valve. It's a cautious, good practice to have that contingency. That third column is called the general fund contingency, and this is a little bit more in the purview of the city council, ultimately to decide how to address the general fund budget and the PSVS budget. But they're currently the general fund expenditures are going to be higher than the revenues, and so there's a gap in the general fund, and there are a few different options for how to address that gap. But what we've identified early in the process for transparency is that if the city council chose to address some of that gap with PSVS funding, those would be the projects we would recommend be foregone. Essentially, if council chose to use some of that funding, those would be the projects that we would just take off the list and not do in this coming year based on where we're at with the total city budget. Now, taking a really high-level look at where we're putting these funds, again, we're going to go through presentations at the department level that get into these details. Then we'll have the summary tables that you've seen in your administrative reports at the end so that we can, have that review for discussion and voting. But wanted to just provide this high-level overview for the ongoing. We're looking at this small increase, and it's in only in these two categories. In the safety category for public safety, and then also a few code enforcement officers related to our chronic nuisance blighted properties. If you look at this total added to our existing ongoing costs, we're still below that 60% target that the City Council has set for our ongoing personnel costs. In this category, this is what I mentioned, those recurring operating expenditures. We are recommending about $3 million in new contracts for service. The reason that we do contracts for service, again, is we're trying to avoid adding further employee obligations, and particularly those long-term obligations, and so finding ways by contracts for service that we can continue to address the priorities of the community and enhance our service levels. And so we'll cover through these separate areas. Economic development is largely about increasing the speed of our development's review process. Under safety and resilience, there's a mixture of projects related to police, fire, and a couple other homelessness areas. And under community character and quality of life, there's a large prevention program there, as well as a violence prevention program there, as well as a few other smaller items. And then the innovative and efficient government, those are all measures that would help us to either be more efficient or get additional revenues back to the city, like grant writing support, that again are contracts for services to be a more efficient operation. The biggest chunks, though, will come in our capital side. So there's $30 million there in one-time items. Again, we'll walk through each of these, a couple of highlights. We have $5 million, again, for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund under goal number 2 there. We have under reliable infrastructure, that $11.6 million is almost entirely streets items. And so we have $33 million going towards streets and other funding sources in the coming budget. But adding another $11 million towards streets will have a big boost and impact in making more improvements there. Under community character and quality of life, that's largely parks projects. And under innovative and efficient government, that's largely contingency and reserves. We want to have those significant set-asides again and to prepare for next year's budget. This is more a visual representation of how those funds are divided up amongst the different council goals, at least. And I failed to mention earlier in the tables, you saw that we clearly identified each of the 13 priorities that each line item was connected to. And you'll see that throughout the presentations in the tables as well. We added that column to be clear on that. And this is a broad overlook, again, within those 3 categories I mentioned earlier, that we do think we need to have at least about $7 million in contingent projects. That leaves us, a nearly 10% contingency. If you add our other contingency dollars, it is a 10% contingency. Public tax revenues are pretty steady revenue source for consideration. They don't fluctuate significantly year over year. A 10% contingency is a pretty safe contingency. And this is something probably more we would cover at the end, but just a quick reminder, we're going to look at police and public works today. We'll have our other departments on the 20th. And then we've held the 27th also in reserve so that if there's further dialogue, discussion, and time for those ratifications, we'll have that time set aside. Although if we make it through our presentations on the 20th, we could begin the process then as well. That concludes the quick overview. I think in light of some of the committee feedback at our last meeting, I would suggest we pause if there's any dialogue or feedback at this point, but we do have the details of both police and public works to jump into this morning.
Yes, thank you, City Manager Clegg. So yes, I'll turn to my colleagues just to see if there's any questions or comments. If again, as we've been doing in the past, if we could just kind of raise your hand and try to get my attention, and I'll recognize you. So we can do this in an orderly fashion. Would actually again request that maybe for our next meeting we get trained on the, buzz-in function that is used for city council meetings, so that allows a little bit more consistency and not dependent on my peripheral vision. So, but I'll look to my colleagues for any questions, comments. Yep. Committee Member Abernathy.
At our last meeting a month ago, whenever it appeared was you folks give us a budget, some of us complain about it, it goes the way it's going to go. If we discuss things here that we think should be adjusted or looked at, is any of that going to be done, or this is it, and we're going to vote on this in 2 weeks? And again, I know majority rules, I understand that, but there might be one of us might have a decent idea for some change. Is that even feasible? Because it hasn't been.
It is feasible. What I would give two thoughts to that. One, the nature of the scope of the committee to determine if those expenditures are within the scope of the 13 priorities. It's not necessarily a request for ideas and suggestions about how to spend the overall funds. It's really the scope of the committee is that verification scope. However, there have been some examples where the committee has said, like 2 years ago, there was feedback about a need to focus a little bit more on the River Parkway as an area that was in dire need of some attention. And so that was forwarded as a recommendation by the committee to the city council, and the city council made that adjustment in the budget. But I would caution the committee, it's the way, again, the scope and the process is set up. It's not intended for the committee to kind of move pieces around and change the numbers within those categories. It's to, again, identify, is that consistent with the measure, and provide some of that feedback and advisory to the city council. And then the city council, as I mentioned, has made some of those adjustments. Also, as I said at the very beginning, as we listen to the committee and to the council and others, that feedback often shows up in the next iteration. And so that iteration that goes to council could reflect some of the feedback from the committee as we propose the actual budget to the council in May and June.
And then I would just, not a question for staff, but more of a general comment. I guess my personal philosophy is on PSVS is that, the city council is really the body that's impaneled to make, the actual budgetary decisions. Our job is advisory. And then, again, just my perspective, having advocated for, the creation of this body and how it would work, it is novel that an advisory committee for a sales tax is actually consulted on the front end. In most jurisdictions, it's not completely this way everywhere, but most jurisdictions that have a sales tax, advisory committee or an oversight committee is consulted only after the money is already spent to say, yes, that expenditure was consistent. So, we actually, by having this process where we're advising on the front end and we're affirming on the back end after the expenditures, I think does play into what exactly you're looking for, which is, some feedback into the process and the ultimate recommendations that go from staff to council. Yeah. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. About 25 years ago, I took a class on legal writing when I was in law school, and one of the things they told us, when we're writing a legal brief, we have to include all the facts, even the ones that don't help our case. And so we were told, when you do that, the best way to do that would be to bury the fact that hurts you the most in the middle of a long run-on sentence, in the middle of a long run-on paragraph. And if you're really lucky, you can make that paragraph span 2 pages so that the crucial word that hurts you is split up from one page to the next. Well, I noticed in this ballot measure, when you look at the line that says unrestricted general revenue purposes, that's buried in the middle of a very long paragraph that's separated by a bunch of commas and semicolons. So my point is here, when you're reminding us here by putting this in the presentation of our role as advisory members of an oversight committee. And when I reread the language here, and I see, well, unrestricted general revenue purposes, and we're reminded of that at the outset of this meeting before we hear any presentations about the funding, it makes me ask this question, and I'd like you to explain this for me, please. What, in your view, is the oversight purpose of this committee if literally any spending proposal would fit within the language of this ballot measure?
Thanks, Vice Chair. So, as I mentioned earlier, we as staff are obviously not going to propose something we don't think fits within the 13 priorities. As long as I'm the city manager, we're not going to propose something we don't think fits. But theoretically, down the road, could there be a new council, a new manager who proposes we're going to spend that money on a big new amusement park? You know, maybe somebody could argue, does that fit within number 12, maybe number 13? But it's a protection, it's an accountability, it's a check and a balance. When things are being governed in a reasonable manner, I think the general feedback and the advisory of, hey, we don't think that's the biggest priority, ultimately council gets to decide that. Is that the highest priority or not? That's a council choice. But that feedback matters. I think that advice, recommendations, political pressure, frankly, of a body like this to communicate to the council whether they think something is a good idea or not, it does matter. It plays into how the budget plays out. But that's, you know, how it probably happens year over year. But if somebody did propose an item that was just way out in left field, that's a really important role of this committee to say that's totally out in left field. We don't think that's appropriate at all. Absent that, it may feel a little bit routine. It may feel a little bit monotonous, but there is value in having a check and a balance. And I think there is value in getting feedback, suggestions, advisory.
All right. So we are going to hear from, I'm assuming, Chief Terry? Oh, sorry. Committee Member Matland.
Good morning. The Oversight Committee has baffled me a little bit from the beginning on the somewhat lack of interaction when I first got here. It just, really no conversation was ever open. Good idea, bad idea, disagree with my idea, convince me of something better. Kind of a rubber stamp of people not even participating in the process, I think. That I've seen, to have 9 people take time and your time and basically sit here and not really participate, have any input other than voting. And that's my comment on that.
This will be quick. I just want to I said this a year ago. There's 37 words in the initiative that people voted on about the spending. And of the 37 words, 27 were law enforcement. So that's 2/3 of the monies as people voted because that was what they were sold. And I think it's important we remember that. There's pages to it, but the spending was 37 words, and 2/3 of it was for law enforcement.
Committee Member Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. Well, Ms. Abernathy hit on that 37 words in the ballot initiative, but if you talk to any of the council people, they'll only refer to the 2 that refer to unrestricted funds. That they pretty much do what they like to do, which, you know, I'm not saying either way, but I want to get to how much money we're really talking about. The last time we started this, we actually had a little overview of the entire budget from the finance manager. And I noticed that's missing in this particular presentation. Because I think, personally, I kind of wanted to see the entire budget and where the Measure N money really fits into that. And so I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity for us to see that in the next 2 weeks or not, because I did have a couple of questions for the finance manager.
Committee member, are you referencing the entire PSVS budget or the entire city budget?
Well, I think that the last time we got an overview of the entire city budget and, the big picture, and then we whittled it down to where the measure in money fit into that. And I think that was a very good presentation on the part of the finance manager.
Yeah, good point. We did that largely because we had so many new members, and some of the former members had kind of gone through 3 years of seeing the evolution of, what all was in PSVS as well as how that compared to the general city budget. We hadn't planned to do that, but I think we could. We could come back and provide an overview of what is anticipated in the entire, city budget to just give good context. I think it's a valuable exercise, so good suggestion.
I'll save my question for the finance manager. I'll review with you offline before your presentation. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Committee Member Matland.
A comment. I'm not sure what your name is, but I thought it was very inappropriate and rude for you to sit there and laugh while someone is speaking in a forum like this. It is not a high school city council meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'm just going to say, chair's discretion, we're not going to address each other and issues in that way. Let's move forward with our presentations from the city police chief and his team.
All right, we'll turn time over to the police department to do their presentation next.
Good morning, members of the committee and chair. Thank you very much for being here and the opportunity to share what our next year's request will be. I appreciate your support of the police department very much, and the men and women who are out every day and every night working to protect this community feel your support as well. And we are doing our best to meet the needs and the expectations of our community, while also trying to be good partners and do it in a responsible way. And so I will briefly go over and lead into the conversation about our request. And we have purpose to align our request with certainly the priorities of PSVS, but also the goals of the City Council as we work to address the needs and the concerns of our community. This is our mission statement. We will continue to partner with the community, and you will hear some of that going forward, that we are implementing a community policing philosophy, which looks at problem solving, which looks at dealing with root cause of issues or working to identify them, developing collaborative relationships and partnerships, because I do believe that public safety is a shared responsibility and it cannot fall to the police department alone. But before we get into the request, I'll share there is some good news, and I think it's important that we talk about it. There's been tremendous amount of work in the last year, specifically around developing of partnerships, identifying and developing differential responses to calls into our comm center, and tremendous work around gun and gang violence, which we have seen some significant reductions in 2022. Compared to 2021, we saw a 40% reduction in homicides in our city. After 2 years, 2020 and 2021, we saw record levels of homicide. We saw a 40% reduction in those homicides back to just around the 2019 number. In that total violence, we look at gang activity and gang shootings. We saw almost a 50% reduction in gang shootings, a 30% reduction in our ShotSpotter alerts. We have about 6 square miles of our city that are covered by the ShotSpotter gunshot technology. And over the course of the year, we saw a corresponding reduction, as we saw reductions in homicides and gang shootings as well. and Assistant Chief Stratton will talk a little bit about that in more detail. We've also completed some capital improvements to our facilities and resources that are available to us. After about 2 years or so, our pistol range retrofit and remodel was completed, and we are now utilizing it again for firearms training. Our physical agility course that we use for testing during a police officer application process and during the police academy, we partnered with Recreation and Parks to develop and build a permanent agility course in Yokitz Park so that it can be a community amenity as well, but also a very dedicated and permanent place for us to hold testing. We are in the process of right now of retrofitting or remodeling the Mill Creek House at Mill Creek Park, and that is going to be an employee wellness or a resource center for police department employees, and we're hopeful that that will be open in May. Because of staffing growth, we were able to create and field a second impact team. Impact team is our lead resources dealing with low-level criminal activity, quality of life issues, the impacts of homelessness in our business community and neighborhoods. We were able to field a second team. We have planned to field a third impact team as well as our resources continue to grow, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in one of the requests. Last month, we fielded an organized retail theft unit. Again, due to increase in staffing, we were able to devote some detectives to specifically focus on organized retail theft. We know, and it is widely known and seen, viral videos across the country, but we are seeing tremendous amounts of theft here locally, and our businesses are suffering as a result of it. So in the last month, again, due to department growth, we were able to field that team, and they've been very successful, but it is a big lift. They are focusing on investigations here locally and working with local box retailers and other retail establishments, identifying who the chronic offenders are, following up on them, and making numerous amounts of arrests. We're also working with the CHP's statewide task force in this area as well. And we are going to be applying for an organized retail theft grant that will be released by BSCC, by the state, here very quickly, focusing on organized retail theft, theft of cargo, motor vehicle theft, which we have a very high number of every year. And so, again, due to department growth, we've been able to field some of these resources, and I'm very hopeful of how we're going to be able to make some local impacts to this as well. We're continuing to participate in the human trafficking task force. We've participated in over 50 investigations last year just here locally within our community. There are several other, as I said earlier, we are utilizing a community policing philosophy and working to build partnerships and to identify those issues that are impacting our community the most. And maybe it's a police resource that needs to be dedicated to it. Very often it is not. And we're looking for those opportunities to do that. But we're also very much paying attention to sort of the prevention and intervention aspect of this. And so we have worked with the district attorney's office, the high school district, Kern County Probation, the public defender's office to develop a youth diversion program. That began in February of this year, where it targets those youth that have a first-time offense, that they get the opportunity to understand the impact of what they did and the decisions that they made without getting drawn into the formal criminal justice system. It gives us an opportunity, the resources that we have available throughout the city and the county, but also a chance for us to work with the parents to understand what some of those dynamics were regarding that particular offense, but also giving them an opportunity to make different decisions and more positive decisions in the future. This program specifically is very much like teen court. You may be familiar with that, where there is a jury of their peers that come and hear this. The hearings are held in juvenile court with a juvenile judge. There's youth that participate as mock attorneys and present the case, both the prosecution side and the defense. But it is a very unique program. We're very happy to have it. Again, trying to holistically address those things that are within the responsibilities of the police department. We have begun a community police academy. This is a 10-week academy that is for members of our community. You spend 3 hours a night, 1 night a week for 10 weeks, and you come and learn about the police department and all the different elements and divisions within the department, go on ride-alongs and see some of our training. But it's really an important opportunity for us to hear from our community members as well as, and to know how well we are communicating and performing the service in the community. And so I would encourage you to, for yourself or to others, to go to this Community Police Academy. I think you'll find it a great experience. The second class graduates tonight. I think there are 25 or 26 that'll graduate tonight. We are working through our stipulated judgment with the Department of Justice. We are in our year 2 working plan, and as part of that requirement is to put together a community advisory panel where we present our improvements and proposed policies to the community and have an opportunity to hear from them, get their input, and we have seated that panel. We had our April meeting last night. We meet with them monthly, and over the summer and into the fall, we'll begin presenting many of our policies that are being improved as a result of the stipulated judgment. One of the things I want to highlight also is some technology that we've used to improve our engagement with the community. SpiderTech is the technology, but it automates. So we talked a little bit about this last year. It was approved in funding through PSVS. So 2022 was our first full year using this technology. It automates. So when you call the police department and enter a call for service, you get a text message that pushes out to you, sort of a notification of your call. If there's a delay, more than 30 minutes, you'll get another response indicating that we understand that the call is still there, but that we are being delayed. And then after the call is closed, you will get additional notifications asking you to participate in a survey and how the service was delivered. How was your contact with the dispatcher? How was your contact with the officer? But more broadly, as through the life of an incident, say it wasn't just a simple call for service that an officer resolved at that time, that it would involve some sort of a crime where you were the victim of a crime, we would continue to contact you periodically, informing you of who the detective is, what their phone number is, what your case number is, what the disposition of your investigation is. If it gets closed, you get a notification of that. If it gets sent to the district attorney, if there's an arrest that is made, all of this is automated notifications. Because the reality is, once you engage the services of the police department, very often it's confusing about what the status of it is. I don't know who to call, what's next. And this is an effort by us to, again, expand our services, engage in a much better, stronger way, but at the same time, also give us the opportunity for feedback from the community on how we're delivering the services. So in 2022, 115,000 surveys were sent out. Just under 14,000 were returned. We would like to see that survey rate increase, and we're going to be taking some steps this year to try to do that. One of the unique things about this is we are learning and working with this particular vendor that we can also understand, and we're going to have a better understanding this next year about where the surveys are coming from, what areas of our city are coming from. We have 6 police zones, and we will be able to begin isolating where those surveys are coming from so that we have a better understanding of how the services are being received in different areas of the community and where our opportunities lie. Here are 4 of the questions that are asked during these surveys, and the results there, the score is an annual score over the full year of 2022. So again, it asks you what your experience was like with the dispatcher. How was your communication, or how did you perceive the communication with the officer? And as you can see, I'm very pleased with the performance of the officers and the dispatchers and the men and women of the police department who, again, work very hard to provide services to the community. But it also is some measurement of the public's perception of the community as well, how safe they feel about this community and to what extent do you trust us. So we're very grateful for this resource, and we look forward to be able to put it to good use throughout the city. We participated in just over 50 community events last year, and so I want to very quickly just show you some photos of Halloween's Easter egg hunt for the visually impaired. There's an officer working the counter at Starbucks. We held community zone meetings, so officers are assigned geographically, and so we've held 2 meetings so far this year in our metro zone and our hill zone. Our next valley zone meeting community meeting will be at the end of May or early June. And these meetings are where the officers who work that area have a meeting particularly and specifically with the residents of that area so they have a better understanding of what those issues are in that particular area. And one of the things that our highlight of the year has been the last several years is Halloween. So this is an aerial picture. I put an arrow where the police department is, and if you can see the crowd lined up down I Street, around I Street, up in front of City Hall South, a band over to the east, and then bound south, down Chester towards the underpass. And so this was members of our community coming out and going through the Halloween event at the police department. And this year we had just over 3,000 people attend. In fact, we had to put officers at the end of the line and deal with quite a few tears because we were just going to simply run out of time. And so, again, this is so fun for police department staff because inside the police department, if you've not been to it, I encourage you to go. The entirety of the police department inside is decorated in different ways on the different floors, and it's staffed by our staff who get to interact with the community. And so it is one of the events that we really love to do. But again, I give you some of these highlights while I fully recognize that we have many, many challenges and many complex ones. I wanted to give you some example of how we are trying to deliver this service across the community and deal with real issues in a reasonable, responsible way, while at the same time doing some things that are not quite as traditional so that we can continue to engage with the community and strengthen our relationship with them. So I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Chief Stratton now, who will take you through some more of the crime data, a look at some of our traffic issues, and then Assistant Chief Hale will go through some of our response times, our call 911 answer times, some of our recruiting issues, and then we'll look forward and begin addressing our request for this year.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and talk to you a little bit about. I want to give you a little bit of an update since we got to speak last year, and I think it's important for you to be able to see a little bit of what we've been able to do with the resources that we've been given. And I will say that some of the priorities that we have here are established through a variety of different ways, some through the measure, and some is based on the data that we have and our increased capabilities and being able to have that data. Some of it is based on our expertise. And a lot of it is based on community feedback that comes from a variety of different areas. Chief talked about the advisory panel that comes through there, but it's through conversations, it's feedback that we receive from bodies like this, frankly, as well, that really influence where the department is going and the things that we are doing. So the 3 things that I want to talk to you about today are going to be about gun violence. We're going to talk about response times to our priority 1 emergencies, which is our highest priority life or death emergencies. And we're going to talk a little bit about traffic safety as well. So Chief referenced it. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of our violent crimes and gun violence and violence-related numbers. It has been a priority of the city, really, but as well as of the police department, and our highest priority is working on reducing gun violence. That's something we've been able to do with an increase in resources, increase in personnel. It's allowed us to have outside consultants and grants to help be able to look at best practices and things that are happening across the country, how we can take that and apply it here within our own department and our own community. We've been able to increase the information flow within our department. We've been able to focus our enforcement on the percentage of people who are truly driving the high numbers of violence and being able to have our enforcement focus there. It's allowed us greater collaboration with community-based organizations who are doing a tremendous amount of work and really partnering with us. There's a briefing that a lieutenant and I give to a variety of different community members on a weekly basis. And they do some proactive work with us as well on some of the things they can do, providing wraparound services for victims and trying to reduce the potential for retaliation. What we've seen in those areas is we've seen some very stark decreases in those numbers. So when we're seeing a 40% decrease in homicide, we're seeing over a 50% reduction in gang-related homicides and 49% reduction in gang-related shootings. And that's these are significant numbers that I'd love to stand before you today and the police department take full credit of it, but that wouldn't be the truth. There's a tremendous amount of community support and community-based organizations that we're working with that we think is equally responsible for seeing some of these reductions. So we're thankful for the resources and the investment that's allowed us to do that. And part of our request this year, as our staffing increases, is to continue to have additional capacity to be able to focus our efforts really, again, on the small percentage of people that are driving a high percentage of the crime. I want to transition a little bit and talk to you about traffic fatalities. This is an area of, where we're continuing to focus on, and we've kind of seen a reverse number of the trends actually from our gun violence numbers. We're seeing an increase in traffic-related issues. It is a priority for us, and it is something that we're continuing to work on. We're working with some of our additional partners, even within the city, on looking at a variety of different ways that we can look at traffic calming strategies and how we can leverage additional technology, red flex cameras, to be able to get to that point. We are still working on increasing our capacity as it relates to our motorcycle enforcement, being able to have additional capacity in lower levels of the traffic division. You'll hear some requests at the tail end of our presentation that really creates additional capacity to move officers to the street. And our vision for that is, as we move those officers to the street, that they're going to have additional capability to be able to have that high visibility enforcement, because we do believe, as it relates to traffic, that high visibility enforcement really makes things a little bit safer. I know that I've been a cop for almost 20 years, and when a cop pulls behind me still, I get a little something in my gut that tells me that when you see a motor cop on a coming through there. So we do believe that visibility will help make our roads a little bit more safe. But again, I think there's a variety of different things that the city is doing as a whole that hopefully we can see some of those reductions. So that is a big area that I hope when I hope I'm standing here next year presenting to you. But if I am, I hope that we're seeing some decreases with those as well. Lastly, I want to talk to you about response times and response time numbers. And kind of the gold standard all across America for police departments is for priority one responses to be able to be there within 7 minutes. We cover 162 square miles in our city, and we really want to be able to be anywhere, top to bottom, corner to corner within 7 minutes. There's a lot, as you know, a lot of area that we have to be able to cover, and a big portion of this we think deals with response times. Just being able to have, our staffing to be able to get there is a big thing. And as we've been able to increase our staffing because of the investment, because of the measure, we've been able to see a reduction in our response times. So since we last spoke to you, we were able to see an increase and get below that 7-minute standard, where we were right at it at 7:07, and then dropping it down to 6:56, and then moving forward, you're able to see we've broken it down by our zones. We have 6 different zones within the police department. Within the city of Bakersfield: North, Central, South, Hill Metro, and Valley. And we're able to see some significant decreases across the board. Excuse me. Some significant decreases across the board, but some of the zones we did see some increases. We saw some increases in the North zone and in the South zone. We're a matter of 13 seconds in those areas, but we were able to see some decreases in other areas as well. And as our city continues to grow and expand, it's definitely going to be a challenge for us. We had an increase in calls that are coming in, and you'll hear some of those things as well as our city continues to grow. But this is an area that we want to focus on, and we were able to see some increases, and so that's good news. And as we get closer to staffing, full complement of our staffing, we think that that will be able to help reduce those response times. Some of the requests that are coming in are going to create some operational efficiencies for us. Some of the things that the requests we have to contract services, again, to push officers to the street, to be more available, to help see some of these reductions. So I'd like to turn it over at this point to my partner, Assistant Chief Mike Hale.
I had a nightmare last night. I was going to get stuck in the chair with all this stuff wrapped around my waist, so I made it out. So good morning. It's a pleasure to stand here in front of you again this next year and be a part of this presentation. So I'm going to talk to you all about a few different things. We're going to talk about Communication Center. We're going to take a shallow dive into our staffing for the whole department, professional staff and sworn, talk a little bit about our academy graduation rates, and then a collaborative with Kern County Behavioral Health Recovery Services that we're really proud of, that definitely meets the goals of PSVS and council goals. And so I'll start off talking about our 911 answer times. And so the police department and 911 call centers around the nation utilize NENA. NENA is the National Emergency Number Association, and they provide a standard, kind of as Assistant Chief Stratton talked about, a gold standard of what is the standard that we answer the phone. How long does it take for an operator to answer a 911 call? NENA's standard is 95% of all calls, 911 calls, need to be answered in 20 seconds. So just for a little bit of perspective into a little bit of a deeper dive, so in 22, we had 271,000 911 calls. That's a 911 call almost every minute. On top of that, we had 745,000 calls into the communication center. So you have dispatchers fielding all of these calls, trying to juggle 911 calls. And so if you look at our percentages up there, in 21, we're at 85.7 calls answered within 20 seconds, and then in 22, we're at 91.7. So we had some improvement. I say that our dispatchers are working diligently. They're working very hard. We are short-staffed right now in our communication center. We're down 14 dispatchers. We are actively recruiting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that strategy on a couple of other additional slides. But so our dispatchers are working a lot of overtime and coming up with innovative ways to deal with these calls that are coming in. And one way that we've been working with that is to start triaging that call as soon as we possibly can, as soon as that person gets on the line, and we start determining whether or not it's an actual emergency. Because while they're answering that phone and on that line, there's another line that's ringing. They're having to get to that one as well. So as soon as we determine that it is or is not an emergency, we may put people on hold a little sooner than we normally would have. And so as we continue to recruit and hopefully get our dispatch center up to complement, we'll be able to provide that little bit more of customer service to those folks online. Because ultimately our goal is to get either it's EMS, fire, police, or ambulance to people who are in need or who are in crisis, who need police services. So one thing I failed there was that we did see a 6% increase in our 911 calls with under 20 seconds from last year to 22. So staffing. So this is a very shallow dive and just a kind of a high-level look at our staffing for the whole department. This, again, professional staff and sworn staff, where our complement is 730 personnel. We have 39 professional staff vacancies. Those vacancies are in the communication center, our records unit, and a variety of other professional staff positions throughout the department. Our sworn vacancies are at 49. I'll talk a little bit more about our recruitment efforts and our academy graduation numbers here in a little bit as well. And so we have been working vigorously with human resources the last few years, especially with the PSVS measure, to fill those vacancies. There are a number of things that we've implemented that I believe have been successful, and we have hired a lot of people over the years. We've hired over 200 sworn officers in the last 3 years since the measure became in effect. However, we have natural attrition. We have people that leave, that go to other states that we can't control, and we're not the only victim in that. I believe other businesses around the state of California are suffering from the same thing. And so last year we did have an abnormal amount of folks leave. Is it because of COVID? Is it because of leaving California? It's just a variety of different reasons. And so we're still going 100 miles an hour trying to fill these vacancies. And so we've implemented ongoing recruitment for our police officer positions so that you can apply anytime, 365 days a year, and get yourself into that hopper of trying to become a police officer. Same with our professional staff. We've included police dispatchers into that as well for ongoing recruitment, so we can try to fill those vacancies. And we're going to continue to look at other positions within the department to see if there would be value to having ongoing recruitment. We are looking at civilianization of different jobs within the department to become more efficient. Captain Grimes will come up here in a little bit and talk a little bit more about that. But as it relates to retention and recruitment for professional staff, we want to create an environment where we have opportunity for folks who can promote within the organization and get them to stay and work for the Bakersfield Police Department and make it a career and stay for 20, 25, 30 years until they retire. And we've been seeing that, and we're trying to create the environment to see more of it. We have a website that we started about 1.5 years ago, joinbpd.us, joinbpd.us. At the beginning, the focus was sworn personnel, and we're going to open that up and include some professional staff in that website as well, dispatchers and probably a couple other professional staff positions so that we can grow our reach throughout the state and some of the adjoining states to attract and draw people to Bakersfield. So moving on to the Police Academy. Thanks to PSVS, we were able to start our Police Academy over there at 4646 California Avenue. That's the picture you see there. Again, our website at the bottom. And one of the things that we really try to focus on is our graduation rates. It's important to us to know how many people we can get through the recruitment process, the background process, and get them into the academy, and how many we graduate when the academy is complete. And so if you can see for 21, we had one academy on here. The numbers at the bottom of the bar where it says 21 or 2021-01, that's just the academy number. It appears that we only had one academy in 21. We actually have 2 academies every 12 months. So we had one that graduated in 21, so it looks like we only had one, but we actually try to have 2 every 12 months. And so in 22, during the calendar year, we did have 2, and our graduation rates increased from 71 to 81, and then our most recent academy at 82. And looking across the state, based on California Peace Officer Standards numbers from other academy graduation rates, we're just above average, and I believe that we're going to be doing better. There are a number of things that we're working on as a team. Our training and logistics team, led by Captain Blakemore, doing an outstanding job of trying to increase our recruitment and retention through a number of things. And so, again, working with Human Resources, we created an applicant engagement team. This team consists of human resource staff and police staff and professional staff who engage our applicants after they turn in their application. We're constantly engaged with them through the whole process, through the application process, through the background process, all the way up to the academy, and even during the academy. We've also begun a mentor program. I believe this is our second year with our mentorship program, and so we have individuals within the organization who volunteer to be mentors for our police trainees, to keep them in the academy, keep them motivated, and help them through that process. Our mentor program was recognized by Post as a model mentor program, and another large agency recently has hit us up to see if they could start modeling and learning about our program because it's doing so well. We assigned a senior police officer to be a full-time recruiter. So this individual is responsible for recruitment and trying to bring people to the Bakersfield Police Department. He, along with some professional staff members throughout the organization, travel up and down the state of California, attend a variety of events here in Bakersfield, including colleges, high schools, to engage our youth, to try to encourage them through a pipeline to become police officers or work as in any of the professional staff positions that we have. Thanks to PSVS, we have the hiring bonus, $4,500, that's paid incrementally over time from getting hired to graduating the academy, and then after that first year of service and getting off probation, which is another marginal gain to bring people and attract them to the Bakersfield Police Department. Our academy also pays for some of the minor startup costs for someone who wants to become a police officer, as far as boots, academy PT gear, flashlight, some of those minor costs that are just another marginal gain to bring people to Bakersfield and want to work for our organization versus others. We have the, also thanks to PSVS, we have the employee referral program. Our best recruiters is everyone in this room here today, to bring people to work at the Bakersfield Police Department, or for that matter, for the city of Bakersfield. But our referral program is targeting to get police officers, get our police officers to recruit police officers, and if they do, get them to sign up, join the academy. Once they graduate, they make $500. And we have seen some return on that investment as well. Our next academy is next month, May. It will be somewhere around 40 to 45 trainees will be starting that academy. So we're getting closer and closer to that complement. So hopefully that will get closer to knock off some of the 49 number vacant police officer positions. So this will be my last couple slides here. And so this is a program that, thanks to PSVS again, that we were able to contract with, or partner with rather, Kern County Behavioral Health Recovery Services to develop innovative and efficient ways to deal with a lot of the calls for service that are coming in, and to identify, and this is one of the things we've identified, that what do police officers need to be responding to? There are a lot of people who call the communication center that are in crisis for one reason or another, and it's a mental health crisis. Should we send a police officer to that type of call for service? If it's an emergency situation, yes, we should. But we've come up with a model here where we've hired or partnered with behavioral health and have clinicians in our communication center. And so during the year of 2022, we had 1 clinician. We budgeted for 3. We've just onboarded a second one in February of this year, and the third one will be coming. And so during the 2022, with the 1 clinician working 1 shift out of 5, you can see where I'm going to go here in a minute, there's 747 calls that were diverted from either a dispatcher who, gets that 911 call or gets that non-emergency number, listens to what's going on. Okay, this is something the clinician could handle over the phone, and they divert. So the calls that are 747 were diverted, and that clinician during the 1 year handled 590 of those calls, preventing more than likely at least 2 police officers, if not 3 or 4, going to these calls in the community where we have folks who are suffering from some type of mental crisis. Once we onboarded the second clinician in February of this year, 1 month of data shows that those 2 clinicians handled almost 90% of the over 200 calls that were deferred to them. So that's over 180 calls that officers aren't going to. And so we see this as a huge benefit to the organization as it relates to reducing response times, like Assistant Chief Stratton talked about, and reducing our NENA, or increasing our NENA compliance up to that 95%, because our dispatchers aren't having to be on the phone so long to figure out what's going on, perhaps, to be able to get these calls over to the clinician. So I will turn the mic over to Chief Greg Terry. Thank you.
He's tall. Okay, now we're going to take a look forward and get specific to the request that we have for this next year. And again, our budget is really around centered on the council goals, but these are also representative of our priorities in this next year. We talked a little bit about it already. We plan to have 2 police academies in 2024. Our Join BPDS, BPD.US, was previously for and really primarily focused on filling of the sworn officers. We're going to expand that now to include our recruitment of professional staff. We're going to work to reduce crime. That is one of our primary responsibilities and why we exist. We're going to continue our efforts around the violence intervention programs that we've already talked about that specifically focus on gun and gang violence. We're going to continue our focus on property crime. It is very high in our community, and we're going to be leveraging the organized retail theft units, as well as many other things as the department staffing continues to grow, to specifically target property crime and reduce those things. As I said earlier, we're going to be we anticipate being able to field a 3rd impact team that really focuses on the environment and the conditions affecting our neighborhoods and our business community as well, and certainly affecting all of our quality of life issues. And so that is a priority for us. As we continue to grow, we're dedicating staff to be able to focus on these, which are our community's priorities. You saw our vehicle and pedestrian fatalities rates have increased over the last 3 years. It is too high. There is significant, over 50% or about 50% of our fatalities, though, just about every year are pedestrians. And we know that, and we see them around. A high percentage of those pedestrians are transients or homeless-related individuals that are wandering in and out of traffic. We know that there are significant mental health and substance abuse issues in this community, and those individuals are heavily impacted by that, and we're seeing that on our roadways. And so we're going to be working again, sort of holistically through all the different partnerships that we've been able to develop to reduce these fatalities and make our roadways safer. Our response times. when people call 911 or they call the police department, what they care most about is us getting there as quickly as we can and having the ability to solve the issue. And so that continues and remains our focus, and we're going to be working to do that. How are we going to do that? Yeah, we're going to do it through increasing of staffing as well, but also developing these differential responses like we've talked about a little bit already with behavioral health, and want to expand that so that we can divert all the calls that need to be diverted to the appropriate professionals so that the professional police officers can go where our community needs a police officer. We're also focusing on the priority 2 and priority 3. The difference really between a 1 and a 2 is there's an imminent threat to life ongoing at the moment. That's a priority 1. A priority 2 is there has just been a life-threatening, imminently threatening event, but yet the person who may be responsible for it has just fled. That's a 2. And so we're really going to be focusing on those as well. Again, we feel like as we address some of these other issues around our impact team in particular, our organized retail theft, the behavioral health partnership, where we're diverting and triaging as many of these calls as we can, that we'll be able to have a better response for our highest priority calls. The telephonic and reporting unit, our customer service model and level at this point is not what our community needs or expects from us. And you'll hear about that in just a minute, where we're going to be working to improve that. People are waiting way too long to get a response from an online report or a telephonic report, and we can improve that model, and we're going to work to do that this year specifically. You'll hear about that. Employee wellness. It doesn't matter how many people we have or how many programs or tools and equipment. If our people aren't well, they're not going to be able to meet the community's needs. And so that continues to be our focus, to prioritize the health, the full health of our employees. And again, I already talked about our wellness center that we're hoping to open this next month as well. And so that will continue to be a priority for us as well. Trust building, and the ability for us to strengthen our relationship with the community and understand what the community's needs are, to have them better understand what our needs are and how we're working to meet their needs. We're going to continue to engage the community and look to expand it in some different ways, because if the community doesn't trust us, they don't know what we're doing, we cannot be for them what they need us to be. And we're going to continue, like I said earlier, we are in year 2 of our monitoring with our independent monitor on the stipulated judgment. That continues to be a priority for us, and I'm getting ready to talk about some staffing that is specifically related to that. We're going to request a total of 4 sworn officer positions this next year. The first 2, captain and lieutenant, are really management command level. The nature of the stipulated judgment or the elements within it are requiring us to provide additional oversight at a much higher level than we have previously. And based on the department's growth, the sheer growth in the numbers of officers, as well as the additional responsibilities and oversight and accountability, it is requiring us to increase our command staff in order to meet that need in a timely manner. We've kind of looked and projected over what we anticipate the command level needs will be for us to get into full and effective compliance with the stipulated judgment. Although we're going to be in it for a couple of more years, I anticipate at this point, and we've assessed that these command resources will probably be all that we're going to need to deal with the stipulated judgment requirements over the next couple of years. But it is definitely an infrastructure that we need. You can see I've bullet pointed some of the responsibilities. It is an administrative position within our operations division, which is where our patrol officers are. The largest number of officers are within the operations division. And these two roles will specifically work to implement the variety of performance management systems that we've been built over the last couple of years. And that specifically deals with policy issues, but also audits, random audits, focused audits, inspections, use of force inspections, recognizing our trends and diving into that and understanding what might be behind that. But it is also a service. The intent is also to understand how we're performing. Are we meeting our outcomes? We have a tremendous amount of data now that is coming into the police department, and we've not been able to utilize it in the way that we need, so that we truly understand how many resources we need. Is this a resource issue? We know that there's a number of calls for service or a frequency of these types of incidents, and it seems to be the obvious answer is that we need more people, we need more people. Sometimes that is the answer, but sometimes it is not. And this is specifically going to position us in a much better way to understand how we're performing in the field, and both organizationally and all the way down to the individual officer. And are we meeting our outcomes? Are we getting the efficiencies and the performance that we expect out of the officers? In other words, are they doing what we expect them to do, what we need them to do, and are they focusing on the same priorities? We have a tremendous amount of data that we need to use, and this is going to position us to do that. At the same time, also to be able to be in compliance with the requirements and the oversight requirements that are required by the stipulated judgment. The last two, the two positions at the bottom there, the two sergeants. One is right now will be an addition and allow us to field a sergeant in the organized retail theft unit I just talked about that we created a short time ago. We're currently running a vacancy in a sergeant position in patrol, and we've taken it off patrol to fill this position, but we need a police sergeant to full-time supervise this unit. Again, I've talked a little bit about with the increase in our staffing of police officers, we anticipate being able to field a third impact team, but we need a sergeant. And that is one of the specific needs that we have at this point. So that is the 4 sworn position requests that we have for this year. And Captain Grimes is going to go talk about and really take you through the rest of the requests that deal with some positions as well as some equipment and services.
Good morning. The requests that I'm going to be covering are really fitting within this initiatives the department's been undergoing for the past few years, which is increasing business efficiencies. And so much of what you've heard about the differential responses, the clinicians, and a lot of those will be a common theme in this with these professional staff positions. So in that, most of these positions have been traditionally filled by our largest resource, which is police officers. And so in increasing our business efficiencies, we will be looking to return sworn officers to police officer duties and filling those with a civilianization of a lot of these roles. The support services manager is one that's traditionally been held by police lieutenants. In the sworn field, there's a lot of movement through attrition, through promotion, through reassignment. And so when we get people that are in this area of specialized expertise that only spend a short amount of time, it does not increase our efficiency in managing them. It's disruptive to the professional staff that are making careers out of these areas, and this support services manager will further that professionalization of this role and hopefully retain some long-term talent at that level. It gives greater stability and support for the staff and the organization as a whole. With this position in particular, it is currently filled by a police lieutenant, which will be returned to operations for greater efficiency there as well. The technology manager is again another position that was traditionally held by a police lieutenant. It's currently unfilled, and in this arena of police technology, it's a place where there has been exponential growth in the last several years. This manager, well, every sworn position possesses and utilizes over 10 items of either technology or software or other things. And so when you look at that across our 700 plus member organization, that's an overwhelming task for a transitory manager to fulfill. So having this police technology manager will give us, again, some stability in the role, some professionalization, and we can specialize it more in requesting some IT capabilities that a police officer traditionally has not been able to fill. Also gives us stability not only for the police department, but our integration with other city entities such as technology services. The tech supervisor would work under this manager. It's currently filled by a police sergeant. They're the ones that really manage the users and the permissions and the day-to-day technical aspects of all the technology that we utilize. Again, making this a civilianized position will return that sergeant to traditional police officer duties. Additionally, we were looking at some other civilian positions. The police property equipment supervisor is one that will supervise an area that currently manages all of police fleet and equipment. The other aspect of this position will be the supervision of police facilities. The police department currently has 9 different footprints and facilities throughout the city, and this has been traditionally managed as a collateral duty of a police supervisor. With that, we have routine maintenance of the properties as well as capital improvement projects, and having this dedicated position will give support and oversight to the specialists that are in those areas, as well as a direct integration with the Public Works Department to make sure that we're efficient in managing these projects. The performance analyst is, again, looking at our business efficiencies. We've started this position several years ago and have seen now this need for a performance analyst in the area of operations. As Chief Terry and Assistant Chief Stratton talked about, with the amount of data that we are looking at and the need to efficiently place and utilize our resources, this performance analyst will make sure that we are consistently working with a data-driven approach to that. It will really increase our ability to have better decisions based on the data that we have available to us. The senior records clerk is another position that will allow us to professionalize this role and give expansion for our existing staff. The clerks in the operations division, which is where this position would be assigned, are currently collaterally supervised by police supervisors who don't necessarily understand the technical nature of the work that these clerks perform. They are a tremendous help and support to the operations division, and this will give them some specialized direction and supervision of the activities that they perform. As we looked at maximizing the use of our police officer resources, this retired annuitant role will help in that. Currently, we utilize RedFlex, red light violation technology at a number of intersections in the city. What that requires from the police department is that a sworn officer reviews the video, issues the citation, and then responds to court to testify. That's a huge resource need. It's a very necessary program, but a drain on the department that could otherwise be filled in another way. The court commissioner has said that they would allow a retired police officer to fulfill that role. And so increasing the retired annuitants there to 2 positions will allow us to return a full-time traffic officer to those traffic officer duties that are so needed. Looking at the ways in which we support our roles, we currently utilize off-road vehicles, especially for our impact and patrolling areas of the floodplain and of the rural areas of the city. Those resources are not easily deployed from a downtown or central location. And so we have a need to have trailers to take them out to these areas, and also with the harsh elements here, a protective way to store those. Having the trailer and the C-trains will allow us to increase the life of those vehicles, but allow us the ability to respond more precisely to the areas where we need to inject those. One of the things that we've utilized are the new police responder pickup trucks. And so we have 2 of those currently in service, and they've proved to be an invaluable resource to especially those impact officers working in the field who need something a little more than a traditional sport utility vehicle. It'll be utilized to tow those trailers, and with the addition of the 3, it will allow us to distribute them across the 3 impact teams. The request for that will be to take 3 of our vehicles that we are already going to be replacing in the next fiscal year, and to allow for the increase in the upfitting cost for this type of vehicle. In looking at other ways of improving our efficiencies, contracted services is one of them that you've heard about. And so one way that we want to do that is in the K-9 unit trainer. And so it's currently being performed by a senior police officer. Looking at an outside consultant will give us outside perspective and analysis and specialized training by somebody who is an expert in their field, but also returning that senior police officer to full-time police officer duties that can increase those operations efficiencies. Chief Terry talked about the telephone reporting element. This case service is integrated with our current records management provider. And one of the ways this will help us out is our current system of online reporting is very cumbersome and difficult to navigate. The telephonic reports have a significant lag time, and this technology implementation will allow reports to be completed by computer, mobile device, and also by voice. This technology is an incredible resource to our community because it utilizes over 30 languages that allow somebody to interact with the service in their own language. There's going to be a significant increase in improvement in customer service, as well as our ability to take the data and ingest it into our system more quickly to give us the better data-driven analytics that we need to understand where crime is occurring. And finally, the digital record conversion is, as technologies have improved over time, in the communications center, we used to record on data tapes and things of that nature. And so as we've progressed away from those technologies, we still have a need to be able to retrieve that information from 911 calls and from police radio traffic that is held on these old mediums of storage. These things are degrading over time, as well as the equipment which you can utilize them on. Our vendors have told us about their urgencies that even the equipment, which is limited, is failing. And so there is a emergent need to get these records translated and converted into a usable medium. And finally, the Emergency Vehicle Operations Center. This is an area that is currently being utilized by the police in the academy and also in in-service training for driver operations. EVOC is Emergency Vehicle Operations Center, and so there are at high speed and low speed maneuverings that are conducted there. It's also utilized by code enforcement and the fire department. And there's currently no classroom training or restroom facilities out there, which make it quite difficult to be utilized in the way in which we would like to. The cost for the facility is $300,000, which we are expecting to be offset by reimbursements from the state. Currently looking at reimbursements this year for $125,000, and hopefully that future years will provide that reimbursement from the state for the required training as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Terry.
Sure. All right, that concludes our presentations. The next 3 slides here are just a breakdown of the cost and the request by position and all the different elements of operating equipment and the personnel, and then a total request from the police department this year. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Chief, and your team. I will turn to my colleagues. I think I will go to Committee Member Prince, and then you have questions? You have questions?
Yeah, I just don't know how much time we have.
Okay. Well, then what I'll do, if it's okay with everybody, is I'm just going to go down the row from Committee Member Prince all the way down to Committee Member Matland. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the presentation, along with your personnel. I do have a few questions in regards to what's being presented today. First question, but actually, is there anything that the department has requested in the last 3 years since we have been utilizing PSVS funds that you have, or your department, have not received in regards to funding?
I don't believe so. Not that I can think of.
Okay, great. I would like to say kudos in regards to the reduction in homicides, gang shootings, and things of that nature that you actually have highlighted here in your presentation. But I would also like to know in regards to the statuses, in regards to other types of crimes, such as burglaries, robberies, and theft as well, just to see where the city or the impact of additional officers or the funding that PSVS has provided, how that has also impacted the department and the community as well. we talked about, you guys talked about in regards to attrition, and over the last 3 years, how you have actually brought on over 200 new officers. My question is in regards to where does the department stand in the number of sworn officers at this present time as compared to 3 years ago before PSVS was initiated?
I still think that we are in the range of plus 70. I'm just doing the quick math off the top of my head, because when Measure In started and the sort of the quest for 100 additional officers began, our complement was increased at that time, but we were already, I believe, about 20 positions short at the time that started. And so today we have about 49 vacancies.
Okay, 49
So
vacancies?
yeah. So that's why I was going to try to do the quick math here. It's 50 of the 100, I think, but then you add another 20 because we started 20 below that. If I'm tracking your question and my math is right, but it might not be because that's why I'm a policeman. But that's about where we are.
Okay. You also mentioned, or was mentioned earlier, that you do have some vacancies in some of the civilian or the other positions within the department, and those positions have not been filled as of yet. And I know that you're requesting funding for additional positions here as well. What is going to be done in regards to those positions that are currently vacant, which I would assume does leave an opening in your general budget because those positions are not filled?
Yeah, so it is a challenge, and I think staffing, I think we all understand the challenges that all professions across every field is feeling with staffing, and we certainly are feeling the same. Many of our professional staff positions are clerk-related positions, clerk typist, records clerks, certain dispatchers, about 14 of them now. Dispatchers, we are actively recruiting. With the other staff, we're having to compete with the private sector in some respects for a lot of the same resources. Compensation is a factor in many of these areas of these positions. And so, the city's working hard to address that and make us competitive, but it is somewhat outside of our control in some respects, but we are actively leveraging and engaging across the different types of classifications where we have the vacancies and working hard to fill them specifically. But retention, even retention, not just for officers, but in some of these professional staff positions is challenging for us as well.
Okay. And last question for now. Has your department worked with other departments in regards to determining what can be done about the fatalities, particularly the pedestrians and bicyclist fatalities in the city? And is there anything that's being presented to us that will help in regards to helping to prevent that as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it is a difficult thing. I spoke about it briefly. About half of our pedestrian fatalities, or about half of our fatalities every year, are pedestrian related. And most of that is pedestrians in the roadway at times of darkness, outside of crosswalks, just stepping out into cars. When we start looking at the facts of those cases, we're learning that a high percentage of them are transient or homeless-related individuals, or individuals with substantial histories of substance abuse and mental illness. And it is all of those kinds of, the three of those factors, where we are seeing a really high volume of our fatalities. And so we're working with our impact team. Our impact team, like I said earlier, is really focused in this area because they're in the business community a lot, in the environment of that, where they're dealing with a lot of these individuals who are transient or homeless, have substance abuse, mental illness, and working hard to deliver services to them, to intervene and get them to accept services so that we can remove them from the businesses where they're impacting that and the community at large, but also working, trying to save those individuals and get them the help that they need. We've also, we didn't talk about it here, but we've expanded our co-response teams with Kern Behavioral Health as well, where we have a police officer and a mental health clinician responding to calls for service, trying to deal with these kinds of individuals and these kinds of incidents specifically to prevent them and to intervene in what is occurring. Beyond that, on the traffic side, yeah, we are contacting and work with CHP most locally and getting some of their resources and understanding how they might approach some of these issues. But we're trying to really leverage all of these types of resources and information to impact it. But again, a lot of our approach is to understand what is occurring and why is it occurring, and we're really trying to get at the root cause of many of these issues.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I lied. One more question. On the PSVS personnel requests under the professional staff positions, you also have a request for retired annuitants. And my question is, in regards to that particular position, have you looked at the possibility of having these individuals as independent contractors or consultants to do the same type of work instead of bringing them on as personnel full-time?
Well, a retired annuitant is able to come back and work a maximum of 960 hours in a year. They receive no benefits. It is just a straight hourly wage that they're performing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Prince. Committee Member Rojas Mora.
Thank you. I think you answered a lot of my questions with
Good.
his questions, but I do have a couple more.
Okay.
One is the question on the data analysts. And it's more of a comment, but I'm hoping that we can get some more information on the impacts on serving the homeless population. I mean, you mentioned especially a lot of the traffic accidents and fatalities occur with transients. So I'd be really interested in seeing that intersection of how many resources go towards addressing the homeless and transient populations. So especially as it relates to Measure N funding. And then my second is a question. You mentioned under the Emergency Vehicle Operations and Training Facility that there is a reimbursement of approximately $125,000. Just out of curiosity, wondering whether that reimbursement goes back to the department or would it go towards Measure N, since Measure N is funding a portion of that?
That's a very good question. City Manager?
Yeah, the reimbursement will go back to the general fund, and really what it looks like is the monies, because the total cost for that project is actually in excess of $300,000. And so it won't be sort of a new revenue to benefit the city. It will just pay for those additional costs of the same project.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you very much. Committee Member Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say, I wanted to thank you, Chief Terry, and your staff for coming out here and talking to us this morning. I get a perception in the street that your reputation, Bakersfield Police Department's reputation, is improving. And I think that's because of the community engagement that you've done over the last couple of years. So I hear a lot less negative things when I'm out. So
I appreciate that.
Tribute to you and your staff. I did want to ask you a couple of questions because you talked about the number of your total complement of 730 and being over 60% of that being sworn staff. There was no mention of what the diversity is. Do you have any information on the diversity of that? Men, women, minorities, do you have any information about that?
Yeah, not off the top of my head in terms of percentages, but we do have it available. Absolutely.
All right. One of the things you talked about was the new academy facility that you have, and I guess at the end we talked about the facility for driving. Have you explored any sharing of those resources with other agencies? You know, some of the smaller departments where you can provide some training to those people and then, you know, recoup some of our costs. Has there been any discussion about that?
We do have cooperation with local agencies. For a large period of the time that our pistol range was being retrofitted and remodeled, we were using the Shafter Police Range. We've also had them come into advanced officer training or ongoing training for officers as well, that we allow them to come in at sometimes and have develop some partnerships and exchanges with that as well. We've had some conversations, and we currently have some ongoing conversations with Bakersfield College regarding a joint regional training facility and what that might look like for our community. But because of kind of how we're spread out, we've not had, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've had any specific conversations with sharing a facility such as this that I'm aware of. Okay. The sheriff's office, I understand, has used our facility here a number of times, but we've not had specific conversations about sharing of costs or developing or improving some of these facilities, but it's certainly something that we can do.
You mentioned in the, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit because my notes were jumpy, but yeah, you mentioned in your statistics that the shot caller, the number of calls through shot caller had gone down some 30%. Is that because the criminals figured out where you have the listening devices, or what do you attribute that to?
Well, yes, the ShotSpotter, it covers about 6 square miles, and we saw about a 30%, like 1,200 and something alerts last year, or in 21, and just around 800, a little over in 2022. I would attribute it that it's all an impact of the work that we're doing around gun and gang violence in particular. The vast majority of our homicides are by shooting and gang-related homicides specifically, and so we saw significant decreases in the number of homicides and specifically the number of shootings. Where our ShotSpotter technology is in areas where we've seen historically a large percentage of our gun violence. That's why it's there. And so as we've seen gang-related shootings reduce, we've also seen corresponding reduction in our ShotSpotter alerts, and so that's what I think that they are all tied together. The work that we're doing with the community in this, it is very intentional, it's timely, and it's intentional in a couple of different ways. With regard to gun and gang violence specifically, police department staff meet weekly and look at what shootings have occurred. What are the circumstances involving in this particular shooting or shootings? Who was involved? Who was the victim? Who does it appear to be the suspects? And then we move into a meeting with our community members and community-based organizations who work specifically with us. We share information with them and develop strategies now to go target, go speak to and contact those individuals. And the community members, by and large, are doing this, where they're going to go to these victims, they're going to go to the suspects who we think might be the suspects, and really try to mediate and intervene and disrupt any retaliation or anything else to continue the violence. And so we're being very intentional about the way that we do that. It is a fact that the vast majority of that kind of violence in our community is committed by a small number of individuals, and we're trying to be very strategic and intentional about that, because I think the outcomes prove that you have better outcomes when you approach it this way. And so we've been utilizing that in earnest over the last year, and that's why I think you're seeing the reductions in gun and gang violence specifically, but it's all interrelated with ShotSpotter.
Okay, thank you. You had made a request to replace some positions with civilian employees. I don't know if the civilian is the right word, but non-sworn officer positions. Are there any statewide statistics or national statistics on how police departments are staffed in percentage? Is there any information about that? Do you know where you stand in comparison to other departments your size?
No, I don't know about any statistics around this specifically, but it is something that the profession has been doing in a variety of different ways, particularly over the last couple of years when there's been a renewed emphasis and focus on what do we want our police department doing? What do we want our police officers doing? What types of work? And so a renewed conversation like that over the last couple of years has spurred a lot of that conversation across the profession. But I don't have any statistics to be able to compare us. There's certainly no national standard But as we look at even locally, and that's what our focus is, we know that traditionally, in these positions in particular, have always been filled by a police manager, a police supervisor. And when you look at what they're doing, is this what we want sworn officers doing? Are there options? Can we get career professionals in there that understand the environment, that aren't getting transferred periodically or promoted and that sort of thing? Because we always are losing and trying to catch up, and there's just tremendous inefficiencies that are around this. But I would also tell you that right now that we're having conversations about how we can do this in the field as well. I talked a little bit already about the co-response teams that we've developed with Kern Behavioral Health. But we're also looking at other options. We have police service technicians, which you may have seen them driving around, men and women driving around in the trucks and working accidents and taking reports that police officers don't need to physically do. And we're examining now and having some conversations with some police departments across the country is there a middle position now that's not a police officer that needs to go to the most urgent emergency, but yet they need some level of skill and equipment and training that's a little bit higher than a police service technician, and is there a place for us to fit that? We're looking at that now to continue that civilianizing or professionalizing these areas where we can, so that we have officers to respond to the highest emergencies and where a community needs a police officer at that particular moment, and there is no substitute for that. And so that is really holistically how we're approaching this, and that is sort of the start and the basis of this request to professionalize these these positions within the police department that have traditionally been held by sworn officers, but we do believe can be held by career civilians now.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. I have no further questions.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
With respect to the, you mentioned several times the stipulated judgment that has imposed some additional obligations on the department. For those of us who are not completely familiar with the contents of that judgment, could you give us, I don't know, a summary of what that requires you to do?
So the stipulated judgment is an agreement that we entered into with the California Department of Justice to make improvements across a variety of police operations. Most significantly, and what impacts or what's most involved in the stipulated judgment is use of force and all that means across all the full spectrum. What type of force, what are our policies, what are our training, what is our supervisor capacities, responsibilities, what accountability and oversight systems do we have in place. That's a significant part of the stipulated judgment. But it also covers our recruiting and hiring and promotion process. It covers elements of our community advisory panel or the development of a community engagement strategic plan requiring us to do certain types of tasks to engage the community and structure the police department in such a way that this becomes part of how we do business. Most significantly, though, in the burden, if we're speaking about it in terms of staffing and that kind of thing, really centers around oversight and those kinds of performance and accountability systems that are within the police department. We've developed a lot of those over the last couple of years, and now we need to implement them, and it requires more command to be able to do that. Very specifically, we heavily and have always supervised uses of force because they're important and we understand the impact that they can have, and we do take it very seriously. A supervisor goes out to every use of force incident and conducts an investigation and makes reports. That has not changed. That continues through the stipulated judgment. What is a little bit different in the stipulated judgment that it requires lower levels of force than we had traditionally done to go to a higher level of review in the process. And we need to do that in a timely manner. As the department has increased, the staffing, the frequency of those events go up as well. Although I'm going to blow my conversation here and take a different way, our overall uses of force have declined over the last year, yet the requirements and the responsibilities that we have for these oversight of these incidents is going up. And so we need staffing as we're working to reduce the uses of force more broadly. We're having to develop and have some responsibilities to make sure that we have more oversight, more levels of oversight, higher levels of oversight actually than we have traditionally done, and it requires certain types of rank to be able to do that. The stipulated judgment requires that. It also covers our canine program, just a variety of things around uses of force, but it also extends into some other areas as well.
Thank you. So I guess just to clarify, when you're asking for funding for an additional police lieutenant, and then you're looking to free up some duties that a lieutenant is currently fulfilling in other areas, you need to free up those lieutenants for the requirements of this oversight.
Yes, specifically, one of those lieutenants that will be freed up is going to come back into the operations division to do exactly that, to fulfill that additional role. Because again, we have a tremendous amount of data that we want to begin using, because there's going to be more conversations into the future about how many police officers do we need. And we need to be in a better position to know what the need is and how we know and why we know that this is the number. And data will help us do that. And so we're working to make sure that we're as informed as we can so that we come back to you with requests that we know that this is the request and we can tell you why.
Can you give me an estimate of how much lieutenant time is being spent on these administrative duties? Like what percentage of a lieutenant's time would be spent on that?
So like one of the positions that is being requested in the professional staff, it's a full-time position.
Okay.
That he's working full-time. And we will take that lieutenant back and put him into operations to begin implementing these other oversight systems.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like this non-sworn staff member will require substantially lower salary than a police lieutenant for that work.
It does.
There was a question asked about diversity of the recruits to fill the openings that we have for sworn officers. Have any applicants been turned away because they don't satisfy a particular demographic hiring goal?
No.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about was this, the Red Flex cameras. And it sounds like the current judicial officer, a court commissioner assigned to hear traffic matters for Bakersfield metro area, is willing to allow a non-sworn officer to testify to lay the foundation for the Red Flex camera images. If that changes, let's say there's a different judicial officer assigned to that role, is there a contingency plan for moving a sworn officer back into that role?
That's certainly what we would have to do. I can have Assistant Chief Stratton come up and talk a little bit about that because he specifically went and met with the courts to try to work through this process to develop this particular plan.
Yes, sir. As we were exploring this, and quite frankly, based on some of the feedback that came from last year's presentation with this body about what can we contract and what can we outsource, this was one of the areas that I started looking at. It took me down a road of meeting with the presiding judge and her staff, and she sent me to the court commissioner and her staff. She had an initial understanding. I have an understanding based on the vehicle code and what it allows to occur that I respectfully requested that she do some additional research, and she did, and told me what she's ultimately comfortable with. The vehicle code allows for a trusted member of the department to review the initial videos that comes in and send the information out, but she was not comfortable with a civilian professional staff being able to testify. She believes that the testifying requirements require somebody who's a sworn officer. So we believe specifically having a retired annuitant that's previously law enforcement experience is where she told me that she would accept their testimony at that point. So if we can get that infrastructure, what it allows us to do is you can anticipate a request to come in to grow the red light camera program going forward, but we were hesitant to grow that to try to improve traffic safety if it was going to take more officers off the street. So if we can get this infrastructure in place here, it will allow us to potentially make the roadways a little more safer moving forward while maximizing and keeping officers on the street. If there is a change in an understanding of the law, and it's rapidly developing throughout the state as it relates to red light cameras and enforcement, as you're well aware, what that looks like, we'll have to be nimble and be able to to adjust based off of that. But it's my hope that we'll be able to continue to move this path forward and still be able to have a level of expertise there, providing the testimony that the department is comfortable with, that the courts are comfortable with, that the public can be comfortable with. But again, putting a round peg in a round hole, and then being able to keep officers on the street.
Related to that, do you know how much revenue the city takes in from traffic fines related to the Red Flex camera?
I do, and that's one thing I'm very thankful for our fiscal manager, Ariam Isaac, and a lot of the things she's been able to help with that on, and that's really where we've started to dive into the agreement, understanding that we have a cost neutrality agreement, and then we've been working with the courts, who's creating certain pathways that is literally underway as we speak, to be able to understand the revenue that comes in. I can tell you frankly that we know what a revenue comes in, but we're working on understanding what of that revenue comes from red lights and what of it comes from other areas, because we get one big check from the county. So that is something that Ariam and I are working on, and trying to create some different accounting practices to be able to understand what that looks like, to be able to offset some of those costs, and then be able to figure, can we utilize that to be able to purchase additional cameras and moving forward that way. So I don't have that number for you, but that is something we are currently working on. And the courts have been very responsive and helpful in getting us that information and working with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to recognize myself just to keep us going in order here. Chief, just to tack on, I think, to Committee Member Coleman's comments, and your highlighting of the Halloween event. I will say I was downtown that evening, and it was really cool to see so many kids and so many people who were really willing to spend time and were really excited about going to BPD that night. So thank you for continuing that tradition. I think it does a lot for that community spirit. So, talking about this stipulated judgment and these things that are, being proposed here, what are the consequences of not meeting the conditions of that stipulated judgment?
That we stay in a perpetual state of being monitored by this independent monitor, and that is very expensive. And so we are working hard to get out of it.
And we pay the cost of that independent monitor?
We do.
Okay. Talking about Academy, Assistant Chief Hale was going through the Academy statistics. We've seen the graduation rates go up, but what's the retention of the graduates? Are we retaining those folks? Are we training them and we're losing them to other jurisdictions?
No, not like you might fear, where we train them for a year or two and then they go to some other agency. We're not seeing that dynamic here locally. We are, like you said, we saw more separations, resignations last year than we did the year before, and a lot of those were leaving the state of California. Some of them were leaving for the state to go work in other states as a police officer. But generally speaking, we're not seeing the quick turnaround that they use us as a training ground sort of, and then leave and go down south, up north, somewhere else. We're not seeing that significantly at all. In fact, we've had several return already from different states just in the last year. 2 or 3 have come back in the last year from other states back to the department, and realized the grass is not always greener. So we're grateful for that, but we're not seeing that specifically.
And then for the salaries that are being proposed for these both sworn and non-sworn, these are all in line with the salary schedule of the city?
It is.
Okay. And then on the, I will try to get this word correct, civilianization. I was really impressed that Assistant Chief Hale and the captain said it so. I just rolled off their tongue. One thing that I think I asked this last year, the public information officer function, is that still being handled by a sworn officer?
It is.
Okay. I would just say, and recommendation that I would have, and obviously it's your shop, but I think that's another area it's ripe for, civilianization, just because you do see that rotation of folks, and it is kind of a specialized function. And then just final question, tacking on to, I think, the theme of Committee Member Prince's questions. Everything you've come forth with to this body, has always been approved. Have you ever held back things that you think you need for your department to operate efficiently, or to get to the level that, both the City Council and you as the commander of it expect?
No, and I won't hold back. If I truly need that, it is a need. Again, like I said, and I appreciate the question. No, this body's been very supportive of us, but we're also trying to be intentional and be good partners in the city, and we recognize the complexity of the issues that are facing our city, and we're truly trying to meet our responsibilities, but doing so responsibly.
Well, thank you, Chief, and thank you to your command staff for being here today and providing this presentation. That's it for me, so Committee Member Abernathy.
I just have two quick. The first one, you said you had these shot spotters, which seem really interesting to me what they can do for you. I don't own stock in them, but I'm wondering if you've got you're in 6 square miles, this city is 150 square miles. So are you folks looking to purchase more, or you have it where you think it's going to do the most good?
Well, thank you for the question. It is a very important piece of technology for us because it uses some very specific technology to detect gunshots and then direct us to where they are. It will tell us to go to an address, and if we're in the driveway, it'll tell us to go down the side of the house. It triangulates the sound, so it's very specific, and it's been very beneficial to helping us respond to the location that it occurred, so that we can get medical aid, so that we can apprehend those, and we've made a lot of arrests as a result of it. But where to place them, we did some studies and used data to identify the areas of our city that are where our gun violence is occurring, and specifically put the shot spotter there. We expanded it in 21 or 22, I think in 21. We had originally, for a couple of years, 3 square miles covered, and then now we expanded it a couple of years ago to now cover 6 square miles. We are looking at the data, but at this point, we're also looking at perhaps some other technologies that is developing as well to see if there are some other alternatives that might help fill some of the gaps that we're identifying where we might need some of that gunshot coverage that we don't currently have. But it's something that we're ongoing, and I'm certainly not prepared this year to ask for an expansion of ShotSpotter.
I just thought maybe the bad guys figured out where you have them, so they're going to go somewhere else.
They haven't seemed to care.
I know cops once told me when I got robbed, you don't realize how dumb the person is when I was trying to figure all these options. I said, you don't. Anyway, the second one is, I heard this from someone, I don't know if it's true, that's why I'm asking, but is recruitment of new cops, is it focused on California? Because I'm told if you try to recruit out of state, which seems like Chicago would be a great spot right now to recruit from, that they don't get to come in at the level they would deserve, that maybe your union rules or something make them go through something that keeps them down on the farm, so to speak. Is that an issue or not in recruiting?
So most of our recruiting efforts are in California. We're going to colleges, we're going to job fairs in different cities, we're going to military bases, we're going in a variety of those areas, but that really is focused on California. If you're a certified police officer in Texas and you wanted to move to California to come to work, there are sort of 2 paths, I believe. One, you could start all over and come in as an entry level, which I have personal experience doing because I came from Louisiana, and that's exactly what I did. I started over and went to the academy and then came up. The other option is there is some testing that you can do through the state. I'm not sure of the entirety of the process to sort of challenge the California certification. It's probably too simplistic of a term, but those are really 2 ways that you can come into the state and come to work as an officer. You could come in, if you did that, if you were an experienced officer and you came into California and you got with post and you got your certification, I think you could come into the department as a lateral, and you wouldn't have to go through the academy. We could put you right through some orientation training and put you right to work. But overall, our recruiting is primarily here in California. We don't see a lot of those kinds of requests.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Dewey.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for all that you do for our community, you and your officers. I'm sure that it doesn't get said enough, but I want to say thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I do have a couple of questions. What is the number that are graduating out of the academy? Not in percentages, but what is in the last couple of academies? What's that number been?
So let's see, the last academy graduated 23. The previous one, I think, was 25. And
Okay,
that's about as far as my memory goes.
that's fine.
Sorry.
That's fine. And then regarding also about the retention issue, when for lack of a better word, an apprentice or somebody comes into that academy, and after they graduate, is there anything that binds them as far as they need to work in the department for a few years before they can possibly transfer out, or is there any? Because I know as a union guy, right, I go through a 5-year apprenticeship program, which is paid for by the IBW and our contractors. And part of that program is upon graduation, I have to work in this jurisdiction for a number of years. If I transfer out or I leave the jurisdiction and go to another place, I have to repay the cost of the education that I received. And so, it's just one of those ways of making sure that people don't leave after you've already trained them, and the cost that we incur because of that. So just throwing that out there.
I appreciate that.
But in regards to the added positions with the sworn police positions, you want to add one police captain, one police lieutenant, and 2 police sergeants. However, and this is just a clarification, when you are trying to, I'm trying to think of the right word here, make it more of an individual-based deal, you're going to free up a lieutenant and you're going to free up at least 1 sergeant. Is that included in this? Are you asking for more than that, or is this, you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, yes. And thank you for the question.
Yeah.
So on one of the professional staff positions, it will free up a lieutenant. That lieutenant is going to go, as we just discussed, back into the operations to do a lot of the oversight that is required to do.
Okay.
The other sergeant that is going to be relieved as we through this process will go to our internal affairs. We have 1 sergeant vacancy in internal affairs.
So we may not really be adding somebody, we just may be laddering into a different position.
With regard to the professional staff
Right.
movement, yes, but the other 2 sergeants that are requesting, that's 2 additional sergeants.
Okay, great, thank you. That's my question.
Committee Member Matland.
I have a question. The park rangers, how many park rangers do you have?
They are under Recreation and Parks. I don't know the number.
Oh, so
Sorry.
this doesn't fall under your,
No, ma'am, it doesn't.
oh, okay. Well, I just had a comment. Then your awareness of your KPIs
Okay,
are so spot on. And your management of delegating or filling, taking your best and brightest and pulling them out and getting them to work and bringing other people in are just fabulous. And I think you're touching so many of the issues of these 13 issues, working with the other departments, behavioral health and mental health and everything. And to have people sit here and ask you if you want more money absolutely blows my mind. And but your leadership and your staff, your team you have built around you is so, so impressive. And your suggestions to some of these other, fiscal items that are on here, I think your input would be dynamic in a better way to do it, because you've proven to me just you're looking to the future, and your management of manpower and assets is absolutely impressive.
well, thank you.
And,
You're very kind. Thank you. And I will share the good news.
Yeah,
It is not me alone.
I mean, nobody,
assure you.
well, you have a great team,
I do.
but, the help, the amount of things that filter down from your department that are hitting these other issues we have, the future looks good.
Thank you. I agree.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
All right. Is there any other questions from my colleagues? All right. Thank you
Okay,
very much,
thank you,
Chief.
everyone. Thank you.
you to your command staff for being here today. And then I think we are going to Mr. Strackalose, is that correct? And then just a note for my colleagues, I have a call at 1, and I'm going to step out and take it, and I'll be handing over the reins to Vice Chair Campbell during that time.
Really quickly, Chair,
Yeah.
as Greg comes forward, also just wanted to share with the committee that in light of a long meeting in the middle of your day, we have provided lunch for committee members.
Do we want to take a break, or?
You know, that's at the discretion of the committee. We're here and prepared to move or pause, but I think you noticed, even though the asks from police were much smaller than in previous years, because so much of the PSVS has been funded to police historically, we thought that it merited a rich conversation, which it was with your questions and comments as well. I think this next presentation won't take up the same amount of time as the last one did for considering that break, but it's at the discretion of the committee.
Want to keep going?
I just also wanted to comment, I do need to step away for a 1 o'clock meeting as well. So if we can go, it might be.
Let's do it.
Get through it.
Greg, you're going to have to, speed talk.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Greg Strackalose, Public Works Director. I'm also joined here by some key members of the Public Works team. So briefly, we'll go to a brief overview. The presentation will wrap itself around priorities and goals, have some highlights of brief updates of 22-23 programs and projects, and then get into the 23-24 projects, and then open it up for questions. Again, the 4 key PSVS priorities we're honing in on are public safety, keeping public areas safe and clean, enhancing amenities, and enhancing neighborhoods. The public safety aspect of public works is really wrapped around transportation, right? So as Bakersfield is is ranked 6th most dangerous in the country for pedestrian safety and 11th most dangerous for bicycle safety, we recognize those factors. We need to do better there. In terms of city council goals and priorities, there are 5 key ones, and we'll demonstrate some of these projects align well with these goals. So I wanted to start out with a little update of some proactive projects and programs we've got. Number 1 would be the Clean City Initiative program. Over the course of the last year, we have essentially 11 Clean City teams that are out and about. Each team has 2 to 3 people on it, and they address the illegal dumping that exists in the community, and they clean the public spaces. They support the rapid response team and the code enforcement team, so it enables them to focus in on their priority issues while these Clean City Initiative teams go in to clean up what's out there. Over the course of last year, 44,000 tons of material was picked up from the public spaces. We've had several appliances, 250 appliances, over 1,800 electronic pieces of equipment, 210 tires, and the list goes on. We also have that was the pop-up drop-off event. That's the proactive approach of what we do. The reactive approach is the Clean City Initiative team. To talk a little bit about the pop-up drop-off events, what we do is every couple of months we pick 2 locations that change throughout the city, and we get with our public information officer and put the word out that we're going to be at these locations to receive waste. Specific key waste. It's usually bulky items that we receive. And as far as the numbers go last year, I just read off the numbers from the top one, the 47,000 tons of debris. And below that, of course, is the Clean Cities performance of what bags of material and carts of debris they removed. So this particular slide shows a list of projects that the committee and the city council had approved for PSVS funding. I wanted to go through some of these projects. And initially, the number 1 project there, Grant Match Fund, has been a very innovative and helpful particular capital improvement project because it has enabled us to match some grants that we've received. $1.4 million for Clean Cities grant for Garza Circle, and then another $1.3 million in highway safety improvement grants. So we're able to match that somewhere around $200,000 and $130,000 through this particular fund. Same thing for Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Grant Match Fund. It's an innovative approach to helping us show that we have the dollars available to make the improvements that we can get grant funding for. Bike path beautification at Pacheco Road is a project that was funded. We are finishing up the design of that and plan to go to construction this summer. I'm going to skip over to number 8 because I've got some slides with some photos on the next few. ADA advances, we continue to improve our public rights-of-way for Americans with disabilities and their accessibility. To the last year, $300,000 was provided for in that. Median funding is a way for us to not only beautify the corridors that we travel, but also control access, which is a safety feature. Jewetta and Weibel are on the board for median improvements this year. And then again, the annexation fund, there was $500,000 dedicated to this particular capital improvement, where if annexations were to occur and certain improvements need to be made to bring it up to a city standard, we would have the funding there. Going back to the next project, street lighting was a particular one of those projects from last year. The street lighting program, of course, is a public safety item that we're calling, but it's also an infrastructure item. Where there's darkness, there tends to be crime. So what we want to do is brighten up those corridors. We separated out the program into different phases. One, we wanted to focus in on intersections where we were seeing the highest levels of crashes, those dark intersections. We've completed that. Prior to that, we completed improving the high-pressure sodium bulbs to LED fixtures. Then we went to another round of intersection improvements, a secondary priority in terms of crashes. But now we want to focus on the corridors, the street lighting some corridors in the disadvantaged neighborhoods where there are clearly poorly lit corridors. This next graphic kind of shows you what we've accomplished and the work ahead. So there is much work to be done, but we have in those green segments of the map are under construction. And the yellow segment is an area where we've tried to accelerate how we get street lighting in there. And the way we've done that is to coordinate with PG&E. They already have the electrical infrastructure, they have the poles, so it's a matter of coordinating with them to get the street lighting on those poles. And so we've tried to be innovative and accelerating street light along our corridors, but yet still, we still have many more locations and work to do. The street lighting projects will include not just the poles and the luminaires, but the underground infrastructure to energize those as well. So beautification of our corridors, the freeway system, we have 4 particular projects. One, you may have noticed some of the improvements occurring at the Hoskins interchange. The city has coordinated with Caltrans on that project to bring it up to a higher standard, a higher level of beautification. That is 75% complete. PSVS has allowed us to bring it up to a higher standard. Phase 1, West Side Parkway beautification. We are currently in the bidding process on that one. We plan to go to construction with a hardscape and landscape component. So it's not just plantings, but it's also hardscape features. Phase 2 West Side Parkway is next. State Road 58 and State Road 99, where the interchange occurs and the corridors there. We are 30% complete in that design, and we hope to begin construction on that in the fall of 2023. And then the Hoskins Bridge beautification project, we are coordinating with the structural engineers, finishing up that design, and hope to be in construction on that. And that's the bottom picture in fall of 2023 or sooner. some of the other traffic safety features and calming features we've been able to hit, where you see a yellow crosswalk, that's a school, a sign that there's a school around. So we've been brightening up and enhancing our crossings in and around schools and parks. But not just there, also the white ones too that you see at various intersections. Enhancement is the key to recognizing that pedestrians could be in proximity. We have 47 public schools, 15 private schools, and about 24 crosswalks at each school. So that's about 1,488 crosswalks citywide that we're working on. And then there's another 5,000 of those white crosswalks throughout the city at stop signs and traffic signals. So to build upon a little bit of what Chief Terry had talked about in terms of coordination with departments and traffic safety, one of the pieces of technology we have targeted are these radar feedback signs. And on the surface, what they do is as you drive down the road, they tell you your speed. And if you're going faster, you'll see that light flash, and my tendency is to take my foot off the accelerator. Behind the board, what's going on is it's recording the time and the date and the speed of the vehicles as they go by. So what Public Works is able to do is to coordinate with the police department to share that information about when the high speeds are occurring so that certain enforcement programs can be conducted as a second step to curb that speeding. Very interesting technology. We do want to expand that to several areas of the city. And they can be mobile. They don't have to be permanent devices. They can move around. Modified pavement marking on road surfaces. So here we've got lots of wide open roads. And one of the things we want to do is to calm the traffic, because we all know that speed kills. The faster you go, if you get hit, your chances of survival are less with the higher speed. If we can calm the speeds down to at least the speed limit, then there are some chances, the chances of pedestrians, bicyclists survival is greater. So what we've been doing is we've been reducing lane widths from 12 foot, which is essentially a highway lane, to something less. And here you see one that is 11 foot wide. And that allows us to put a little bit of buffer space between the bicycle travel lane and the vehicle travel lane. The other part of this marking is an operational efficiency item. So what we're looking at are materials beyond paint. Paint lasts 1 to 2 years and then it fades away. There are other materials such as a thermoplastic material that have a lifespan of 8 to 10 years. So if we can get our crews to spread out over an 8 to 10 year period as opposed to getting out there once every year or two, we're becoming much more efficient in how we serve the community. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about this year's PSVS requests. We have 13 and 4 are contingency items. I would like to start at number 2 because I do have some photos for the number 1. Number 2, alley improvements. This is a continuation. Last year we were able to improve several alleys in the community, and we want to continue this. There are several more to go. Number 3, the pavement markings. You've seen the photos on that one. There's a $250,000 request there. Gateway beautification, we want to continue, but as a contingency item. I'll skip over animal shelter. The streetlight improvements, you saw the work ahead of us. There certainly is a lot of that. And then I'll skip to the Mesa Marine Sports Complex. This is a project that we did put out to bid. It came in higher than what was anticipated. And so this is an allocation to help us fund that project as we go out to rebid this project this summer. Let me just get to the next slide. So the next project is traffic signal battery backup systems. So many of you have probably noticed that there are some frequent power failures that occur in the summertime. And as you're driving down the road at night, this is not what you want to see when you should be seeing a traffic signal at an intersection. So what the Public Works Department is proposing is something called a battery backup device. It's technology that's common in the field. If you see the box down at the bottom, it's that little addition to the box on the left where we have some battery supply and there are components inside the main box. But what this does is not only keeps the lights running, but we don't have to get back out there to reset the signal when the power goes out and comes back on. So again, another operational efficiency item, but most importantly, a public safety issue. The proposal here is a multi-year program, the first year being $200,000, trying to hit 20 of the most important intersections at arterials, and then continuing that approach in future years. We do think this is a great opportunity for grant funding, and we would continue to pursue that as well. Here are some additional graphics with pavement markings. You'll see green enhancements. The thermoplastic in the darker picture pops out a little bit more, and the enhanced crosswalks for pedestrian safety. The animal shelter project, there is a preliminary master plan that's been developed. It's a quite expensive plan, but a multi-year plan. What the department is proposing is in the first year, we look at $500,000 worth of improvements that focus in on the administration building, upgrading that, and then a perimeter fence, which have also been keyed as top priorities by the animal shelter as well. So those are the two key items for next fiscal year. In terms of the complete streets projects, Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard and also Niles and Monterey are two projects on the list. Currently, we are in the design phases for both of those projects. And with Niles and Monterey, we have a 30% design level that we're working on currently. We do propose to get that to 100% next fiscal year, and then move into a construction phase. But we don't necessarily have to wait a couple of years for construction because we have dollars budgeted for a demonstration project where if you look at the top right-hand picture there, you'll see essentially Niles Street with a road diet. So we've taken a lane away, we've continued to maintain some parking, and we've buffered a bike lane. So for a block segment of this particular street, we are focusing in on doing work sooner rather than later. And where we can do that as well for MLK Boulevard, we want to demonstrate a project there. We're a little bit further down the road on that one, but both of these projects are complete streets. And to better define complete streets, of course, it's calming the traffic, speeds. It is, I call it road toning, because now we're kind of moving things around a little bit. We're narrowing up travel lanes, reducing speeds. We're providing a more comfortable walking space for pedestrians. ADA accessibility, of course. We're integrating streetlights into these corridors, and of course, we're redoing the pavement surface. That's a key because road quality. We want to make sure that we're resurfacing these roads as part of these complete streets projects. Also, landscaping is another component of a complete street. Traffic calming, the city just adopted a neighborhood traffic calming plan, which enables neighborhoods to work with the Public Works Department to identify traffic calming measures for specific areas. One of the most common, of course, is speed humps and speed tables that you see here, but there are other measures too. There are ways to create bulb outs and to meander the road to calm traffic, to slow those speeds down. And of course, there are tier 1 measures that can be implemented quickly, of course, enforcement, signage, pavement markings, but there are tier 2 level, which are more geometric changes to the roadway. So we have both conditions out there, and we'll implement the neighborhood traffic calming plan. The funding set up by PSVS will help us to implement some of these measures. This is just that list one more time. And that concludes my presentation for Public Works on PSVS projects. And I remain available for questions.
All right. Well, we'll go the opposite way this time. So Start with Committee Member Matland. If you have questions.
In regards to street improvements, when they're done, who actually performs those duties? The city? Or Caltrans or?
The maintenance of the streets? Or
Well, resurfacing, repairing.
So it's a combination. We have an in-house team, the streets division does do some resurfacing. We also contract that out through a bidding process for some of the more major projects on our arterials. And we do that for the city roads, and Caltrans would manage that for their state roads.
The one issue is the quality of work and the amount of time that a resurface or even pothole damage lasts. How is there any accountability on that? And number one, is it a product issue? Is it an installation issue? Because they can do roads, and our weather variance is not compared to the rest of the country. But these roads seem to fall apart in an unacceptable amount of time.
Yeah, there are several ways to address road issues. One of the most common, there are ways to slurry seal the road, which is the minimal resurfacing approach. Then there are more invasive approaches where you're actually rebuilding and reconstructing the road. All of those approaches are overseen by construction management. So we do oversee that. Now the level of repair or restoration of those roads varies depending upon its condition. So if a road has a specific condition, the approach may vary on how we treat it.
Yeah, I'm aware of that because I've dealt with a lot of it, but it's the quality of work and the length of time you get on pretty expensive projects. Now, is there any accountability of, I don't know how to put it any easier, but the work is not good.
So I guess I'll say that the record rainfall this year has really taken a toll on our roads currently. So we're seeing a lot more potholes. We're spending a lot more time patching and filling those potholes now. The three worst enemies of a road are utility companies that dig into them. They're freeze and thaw, which we don't have, but then there's the rainfall. And we've seen a lot of that this year. So the deterioration of some of those older roads from years ago, we're struggling with now. Where we've recently paved, I think I would tend to say the quality has been higher. We've put in a higher level of effort in how we're rebuilding those roads. I just share that thought.
Okay, yeah, I'm not talking about any because of our abnormal rain, but just the quality, and it's frustrating to not hear, okay, you didn't do a good job. We're just going to patch it and patch it and patch it and then redo it again later. So it's good to hear that, there are some improvements there. Thank you.
Chairman Ortiz had to step out, so I'll assume control of the meeting. Do you have any questions, Mr. Dewey? Member Abernathy?
Well, I have lots. This is an area that, as you know, I'm real concerned about. Who determined that Old Farm, big wide street, you have a picture of it here, that you can even see that the so-called bike lane can handle a whole vehicle and more? And why wipe out that road when I drive it all the time, obviously? There's never bikers on it. There's even a school down the street. But why do that to a really wide road and that much lane for the biker? I don't understand why when you could spend money on 100 other things. Why was this important to do? And what about the homeowners even getting a survey about, do you want something like this?
Well, the road resurfacing project was from curb to curb, so the asphalt was laid where the asphalt was. Where the pavement markings occur were based upon safety, calming speeds a bit to get them to the posted speed limit. And this particular road, Old Farm, has some parking on it as well. It had parking before, and we wanted to maintain that. So the ability for automobiles to park and access the park across the street was important. We did widen and buffer the bike lane for additional public safety.
Old Farm to Rosedale, there's no park. I don't know. I've never seen anybody parking on it, but you're probably your city truck. But trip lights, if that's the right word, I don't know.
Trip.
There's so many intersections that two of us and sit there and sit there and sit there. And most streets, have you thought of focusing money on that rather than some of this? Because talk about pollution where we're sitting there idling and nobody's in 3 of the 5 lanes.
Are we speaking about traffic signal timing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that it doesn't change. It's based on just time and not the cars sitting there.
There happened to be a couple of grant projects that we received to help us improve our traffic signal timing for coordination. Those are in progress now. Hopefully we get to a build stage where you start to see results in less than a year.
To put in more of this lighting system or to make
No,
your...
Not to put in more traffic signals, no, but it's to better coordinate them by putting in better technology into the system.
Because some of them already have had that for years. You can tell it changes like that when you pull up, but then some you just sit there.
Right. And roundabouts are another consideration as well. Not for the bigger roads, but they're a consideration.
No. Yeah, I think and this traffic calming, these are verbs that I've never heard before, but I see what they're doing is they're putting, those blocks that we have to drive over with the car. And I live in a development that has those, and they're really a pain in the neck. I don't know where we're having such traffic calming needs that we need so much of that versus repaving, put our money on fixing these roads. And it wasn't because of the rain. This is, as you know, Brimhall, 20 years, it's been horrible. So I just think the priority, if drivers knew that the roads were better, if the lights would change, the need to say, "God, I've been sitting here so long, Zoom, I'm going to go." I think some of that, and then of course I can hear the kids that are doing it. That's different. But and then the only other thing about medians is I have a real issue, and the city manager knows that. These guys are sitting there in the business district, standing there on your medians this wide, hitting us up for money, and they don't get picked up and removed enough. I mean, I don't know how much you can do it. But those things, if they could be designed in a way that would prohibit somebody standing on them, because there's no reason to stand there, I'd put spikes in them or something, but it just seems like it's created for somebody to stand there while the light's red and hit you up for money. And that seems very, very dangerous. And again, it's those same people that are drugged out and everything else.
If I could offer two thoughts. On the last one, it's, a point fairly made. It's more of an enforcement issue than a built environment issue. But then what I think Greg is perhaps being diplomatic and receiving the feedback, which is good feedback, and I think it is consistent with council interest. In the council dialogue about budget in this coming year, there was conversation about can we increase some of that just straight repaving budget in next year's budget. And it means we'll probably have to take away from a couple other areas. But council is interested in increasing the amount for just straight street repaving. But the emphasis on the multimodal and the traffic safety, meaning the traffic calming as well as the bike and pedestrian facilities, has been a council priority. They've directed staff to make those considerations and include those things in the budget as well.
I don't have any questions, but I'll recognize Member Conan.
Thank you. That's okay. I do have a few questions and some comments. Whatever became of the Hageman flyover?
So the Hageman flyover is still a project. It's in need of additional funding. We are looking for a variety of funding sources through grant opportunities, coordination with the KernCog, and Caltrans. But the funding source is the key.
This has to do with Mill Creek, and I see that you have some money in here for to replace the lighting bollards down in the Mill Creek area. And the Mill Creek has some special meaning to me and Commissioner Prince, because we were heavily involved in the redevelopment agency at the time we did Mill Creek. And I think we both noticed that nobody's maintaining it, some of those improvements that we had done down there. And I go down there and I see the planters there in the street that had been run into, and nobody fixes them. And anybody you talk to, it passes the buck to somebody else. Who's responsible for that stuff down in Mill Creek?
Well, if it has anything to do with the street lighting system, the bollards or the decorative street light, it would be Public Works. And this past summer, we spent a whole lot of time and effort and money on putting new bollards in to replace the older bollards, to get them lit back up, as well as those street lights. So we hope that you have noticed a slight difference in improvement with the brightness out at Mill Creek and in the downtown area via the work that we've done last summer. Not saying that we couldn't do more, but we will be maintaining it.
What about the planters? They're like, I think it's 19th, is it 18th, 19th Street and LO?
Right. So Rec and Parks would play a role in maintaining the plants and the irrigation system for those.
And if I may, I think your point is fairly made. We went through and did a inventory this last spring and summer of areas within the downtown core that had been redevelopment agency areas and Mill Creek, and found a lot of deficiencies. We'd fallen behind on some deferred maintenance in those areas, and so we did a pretty big sprucing up. We addressed several of the planters there along Q Street. We did a lot of work along Mill Creek, not just in the bollards, but also a lot of vegetation, unplanned vegetation had grown up in the canal areas. We took that all out, put some stamped concrete and some more hardscaping around some of those trees. And so we did do a sprucing up in that area this last year, and it was made possible by two things. One was an allocation specific for downtown infrastructure, but then the park amenities funding, it's the Perry funding that this group looked at mid-year. Those funds were used to spruce up actually Mill Creek Canal itself and the planters, because those are parks and rec areas. There are still some planters throughout the rest of downtown. We did some core or key corridors, but there's still some other planters that the plan is to actually take out some of those raised planters and have something more at ground level with some drought tolerant plantings and have a nice sprucing up. So Parks, in their absence, they did do some sprucing up this last year, but we still got some to go.
Okay. Thank you. This actually goes to the point that Ms. Abernathy was raising, and this has to do with the traffic lights. I feel like we have smart cars and stupid intersections. I can't tell you how many times I sit at an intersection at a red light and there's nobody coming from any direction. And I sit there, and it seems like these are all still mechanical timers that are set by somebody, and the light will turn. It doesn't adjust for traffic flows or holidays or any of that nature. And so what is being done to improve those traffic lights to be more intuitive?
Absolutely. Through the KernCog, we received some grant money available for an adaptive traffic signal coordination system. That allows us to put the technology in. It's underground fiber conduit connecting the signals and putting in advanced loops. So before you get to the traffic signal, the signal recognizes that there's a platoon of vehicles coming to trigger the signal to be green. I will say that sometimes a pedestrian will push the button and it will cause the traffic signal to have to reset because it has to allow certain timing to go through. So you may wait at the traffic signal for that time to clear, and then the signal will reset. But we do recognize that. We are working on that.
Are these going to be, these going to have some artificial intelligence in them where they can learn that, an intersection, on Saturday afternoons, it doesn't need to be the same way it needs to be on Monday afternoon?
Absolutely. Not only are there time of day plans based upon the history of traffic, but we have the ability to control the signals from our traffic management center to change the signal timing plan when needed from a remote distance.
Can you, you kind of skipped off over the multimodal item that has $2 million in it. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Sure, absolutely. Let me just go back to my list here. The multimodal demonstration projects, right? So, for example, on Nile Street, we recognize that there is a large pavement area that could be more effectively used to accommodate parking, through traffic, a buffered bicycle lane. So it would be taking a block to demonstrate using items like a temporary curbing material, which is made out of rubber, rather than spending the money for a permanent concrete fixture, potentially using some delineators, which are plastic cones and such. And then, of course, the pavement markings to control that traffic and allow them to see where they need to be. That is a sample of a demonstration project that we want to move forward on that particular block. Now, that's also can be applied to other blocks in other areas. MLK Boulevard. There are many other areas that we could do demonstration projects, creating bulb outs at intersections, shortening the pedestrian crossing times to make it safer for pedestrians to cross at intersections. So we want quick build strategies where we can change if we need to, if we get community feedback desiring a change, or if there are technical issues why we should change the conditions before we go permanent.
Well, I guess I could probably have questions forever, but I'll make this my last question. You have $1,800,000 in the budget for traffic calming. That is proposed to basically be spent at Measure N money, and then you have another $1.5 million for the street resurfacing. That's contingency. And so when we were hearing, at least for me, when I was hearing in the introduction comments from the city manager, I was thinking we were going to get all these street improvements, and here the actual resurfacing of the streets is really just a contingency items that almost like we'll get to it if we have money. And that's what we've been doing with the city resurfacing of the streets. So you look at streets like Ming Avenue and, you know, Stockdale Highway through town, those streets that, you know, are in desperate need of resurfacing that are not getting attention.
If I may, I'll take this one, Greg, because partly those choices were more my choices than Public Works. Public Works requested more funds for street resurfacing, and as we tried to balance the budgets, you know, we made decisions to fit different things in. This is one area where I would suggest to you know, Committee Member Abernathy's earlier question, you know, will things change? Based on council feedback yesterday and the feedback from the committee today, I think it's a fair assumption to that as we bring forward the you know, final proposed budget, that would come off contingency as streets repaving is, you know, continues to elevate as one of the top priorities.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions.
The chair will recognize Committee Member Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation today. I'll be pretty quick here as well. In regards to the street lighting, it is good to see that more time and energy and effort and monies are being dedicated to improve the street lighting. I too believe that the better lit the neighborhoods are, that actually reduces crime as well. But I do have a question in regards to, you mentioned the new lighting that's going in and how you're going to be using more or less more underground utilities. I know a lot of cities that I visit, they actually are using solar in place of a lot of underground utilities and these type of green energies. Is this something that the city has considered, or is it not plausible in regards to the current setup?
No, it is actually something the city has considered and has implemented in certain areas of the city. I think Kentucky Street is one of those areas. The reliability of solar, especially for streetlights versus energized streetlights, is a little different. So we wanted to ensure the highest level of reliability that those streetlights are going to last throughout the whole night. And the battery recharges and replacements are an operational item to repair and to replace. So considering operations and reliability, the proposals that are set forth on that map are for energized lights through PG&E. But we can consider site-specific locations where PG&E connectivity is a little difficult to get to. We can consider the solar option.
Okay. All right. I kind of envision more of like a hybrid vehicle that runs both on electric and gas. Which you use the electric and it automatically turns over to gas. So that would not work in this confinement of once the solar is used, then it wouldn't automatically turn over to the electrical or battery.
I see, sort of like the battery backup devices for the traffic signals. I
Right.
understand. I'm not aware of technology like that for streetlights just yet, but that's not to say it doesn't exist.
Okay. I too am one to wonder when I'm sitting in traffic why the street lights suddenly change or do not change. And I did have a question because actually my wife asked me this question the other day. We're sitting at a light, a left-hand turn, and there's maybe 5, 6 vehicles about to make a left-hand turn. And that left-hand turn signal allowed vehicles to turn for about 5 seconds. Then all of a sudden it changed back to yellow and then red real quick. Then next time it lasted for like a minute. Is there a reason why there are variances? And it's kind of funny, usually at those intersections where they have the traffic cameras. So I don't know whether or not it's a trick. I don't know, but that's what we concluded. But is there a system of why that operates in that manner?
I would suspect that it would have occurred during a peak hour flow, which means that we've got predominant traffic going through an intersection, and we want to clear as much of that through traffic by shortening up the turn movements, and altering the intervals is an option. I will talk to the traffic engineer about if you can give me a specific location to confirm that that signal is operating correct.
Right, so you do those type of systematic time changes based upon each left-hand turn one could be, let's say for example, 5 seconds, and the other could be 20 seconds, the next one. Is that something that is actually manufactured by your system?
I don't know if it's for that particular intersection, but I have seen signal timing plans that have alternating signal timing patterns in them.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Oh, certainly. The chair will recognize Member Dewey.
Thank you. Roads are an ever-changing thing in a city of this size. A road that may be designed for 10,000 cars a year, but due to urban growth, may handle 2 to 3 to 4 times that amount over a period of time. And when you have an infrastructure project such as the TRIP program over the last 10 or more years, that's put considerable amount of pressure on our auxiliary roads throughout the city. With regard to street lighting or street signals, yeah, they're timed based on traffic flow for a given period of time. Peak times being when you go to work in the morning and when you return from work in the afternoon. So it is something that the traffic engineering department goes out to these different signals and tries to do the best they can. But with the growth that the city has seen over the years, there's always a hiccup where you do good in one part, another part may suffer. But until this TRIP program is completely built out, the city's going to see these kind of things happen. It doesn't make sense or cost effective to go in and resurface a street that is experiencing quadruple the traffic right now because of the infrastructure work that's going on here. But once that infrastructure work is completed, that's going to relieve a lot of the pressure that we see on our streets and roads. That's just my 2 cents.
It does not appear that any more committee members have any questions for this department.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. So that wraps our presentations and the item 5A and really our content for today. While we only had 2 departments presenting, again, those are the biggest chunks, including really our contingency and reserves. We've covered half of the budget proposals, and so next week we'll cover the other half with more but briefer presentations.
The final item on the agenda is commissioner comments. We can go. Does anybody have any comments before we close?
No.
Does not appear that there are any comments. I'll reserve my own comments for the next meeting. Thank you. And I suppose then the chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Or do we need to take a roll? Or I'll ask the clerk to take the roll.
Chair Ortiz is absent. Vice Chair Campbell,
Yes.
Committee Member Madland, Committee Member Dewey,
Yes.
Committee Member President Dreesen is absent. Committee Member Coman,
Yes.
Committee Member Abernathy,
Yes.
Committee Member Rojas Mora, Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee members Ortiz, Madland, Perez Andreessen, and Rojas Mora absent.